Hello, and welcome to this preparatory journey for the Genesys Cloud CX Professional Certification. This is an unofficial, independently produced course. It is not affiliated with, endorsed by, or connected to Genesys Cloud Services Inc. in any way. All trademarks, including Genesys Cloud CX, are the property of their respective owners. This course is for educational and study purposes only and does not guarantee a passing grade on the official certification exam. In this opening chapter, we will lay a solid foundation by exploring the platform architecture and outlining exactly how we will approach the exam requirements. This course is designed to transition you from a functional user to a certified architect capable of managing complex, large-scale cloud contact center environments. By mastering these modules, you will gain the technical authority needed to implement robust omni-channel strategies that meet modern business demands. We focus on high-impact configurations, ensuring that you not only pass the certification, but also acquire the practical skills required by top-tier organizations. Understanding the underlying architecture of Genesys Cloud is critical because it explains why certain administrative actions behave the way they do. The platform is built as a pure multi-tenant cloud service hosted on AWS, which means your concerns regarding hardware maintenance are replaced by a focus on service configuration and logic flow. We will analyze how individual microservices interact within this ecosystem to provide high availability and seamless scalability for your users. You must grasp that the architecture relies on a global footprint where regional data residency is handled through specific organization-level settings. Security is baked into the foundation, utilizing identity and access management frameworks that govern every touchpoint from the administration portal to the end-user agent client. As we progress, we will dive into the nuances of platform initialization and organizational settings that form the backbone of any deployment. You will learn how to navigate the administration interface effectively, ensuring you know exactly where to manage global preferences and directory synchronization. A major point of focus is the concept of a tenant ID, which is the cornerstone of your environment's identity and must be correctly mapped to your domain infrastructure. We will discuss service discovery mechanisms that allow components to communicate securely without requiring your manual intervention for low-level networking. This knowledge is essential for ensuring that your telephony edges and external integrations function coherently within the constraints of your specific region. The roadmap for the professional exam demands a disciplined approach to both technical configuration and theoretical understanding of cloud-native systems. You will be tested on your ability to interpret complex requirements and transform them into operational settings within the Genesys Cloud interface. Throughout these lessons, I will emphasize the importance of monitoring platform status and maintaining compliance frameworks to protect the integrity of your customer interaction data. Managing user profiles and directory structures sounds straightforward, but it represents the first layer of security that you, as an administrator, are responsible for maintaining. We will look at how to structure these inputs to ensure that metadata and reporting outputs remain clean throughout the lifecycle of your organization. Success in the exam environment requires not only technical knowledge, but also an appreciation for the structural constraints of the test. We will analyze how to handle questions focused on multi-tenancy and the segregation of resources in a way that aligns with AWS infrastructure best practices. You should pay special attention to the language used in the exam, as it often tests your grasp of the architectural limitations of a shared responsibility model. By working through the provided curriculum, you will develop the ability to navigate the console with speed and precision, which is a major factor in managing the time-sensitive nature of the professional assessment. We are preparing to build a unified understanding of how bits and pieces of the platform fit together to drive enterprise-grade results. I look forward to guiding you through each of these critical technical domains. See you in the next lesson. Welcome back. Today we begin our deep dive into the foundational architecture of the Genesys Cloud CX platform by examining how organizations manage their human capital and structural hierarchies. In this chapter, we will master the technical nuances of organizational setup and people management, ensuring that you can construct a resilient environment capable of scaling with enterprise requirements. You will walk away with the ability to architect division structures, implement robust user provisioning strategies, and configure internal communication protocols, which are critical skills that distinguish a certified professional from a casual user. When we approach organizational setup, we must start with the organizational profile, which acts as the bedrock for your entire tenant, containing essential identifiers and global settings that influence every interaction. Within this profile, you define the physical and logical boundaries of your service, including time zones, language defaults, and the overarching contact center identity that users perceive in their workflows. Beyond simple metadata, the organizational profile serves as a central clearinghouse for branding assets, such as organization logos and custom colors, which manifest throughout the web interface and outbound communication modules. Properly configuring these parameters early in the deployment lifecycle prevents downstream technical debt, as many of these settings propagate through the application's global state. Neglecting to verify these settings during initial tenant provisioning can complicate later efforts to align the environment with corporate branding guidelines and operational regionality. Therefore, treating the organizational profile as a rigorous technical specification rather than a cursory step is essential for maintaining a professional and functionally consistent environment across all departments. Transitioning to user management, we encounter the primary mechanisms for getting human resources into the platform, beginning with the most basic method, manual entry via the administration interface. While manual provisioning is suitable for small teams or ad hoc additions, it lacks the scalability and consistency required for enterprise deployments where user turnover is frequent. A more robust approach involves bulk importing via CSV templates, which allows administrators to define user attributes, such as email addresses, divisions, and roles, in a structured format and upload them for concurrent processing. However, the gold standard for mature Genesys cloud organizations is the implementation of SCIM, or System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. By integrating your existing identity provider, such as Okta or Azure AD, with the Genesys Cloud SCIM endpoint, you enable near real-time automated synchronization. This architectural pattern ensures that when an employee leaves the company or changes departments in the source of truth, their access and attributes in Genesys Cloud are updated automatically without manual intervention. This strategy drastically lowers the surface area for administrative errors and security vulnerabilities related to orphaned accounts. Resource isolation is achieved through the implementation of divisions, which are logical containers used to gate access to specific platform components like queues, flows, and interaction records. By crafting a hierarchical structure of divisions, you can implement the principle of least privilege, ensuring that users only interact with the resources necessary for their specific business functions. This is not just a soft organizational construct, but a hard technical boundary. For instance, you can prevent agents in one department from seeing the queues or interaction history of another, which is a frequent requirement in multi-tenant or highly partitioned corporate environments. As we expand on this, it becomes clear that divisions act as the primary filter for administrative and functional role assignments. When a permission is assigned, it can be scoped to specific divisions, allowing a supervisor in the North American division to manage queues there without possessing any visibility or authority over European or APAC resources. Mastering the interplay between divisions and permission sets is arguably the most complex part of platform security, but it is precisely this granularity that makes Genesys Cloud a powerful tool for global enterprises. Presence management is another crucial component, as it communicates the real-time availability of users to the rest of the system and, by extension, to the routing engines that handle incoming interactions. Genesys Cloud comes with a standard set of presence statuses, such as available, busy, or away, but these can be customized to match the unique workflows of your business units. These statuses are not purely for manual selection. They can be integrated with WFM or external calendars to automatically transition an agent's state based on their scheduled activities. Furthermore, the internal communication profile serves as the nexus for user collaboration, enabling features like internal messaging and directory visibility within the platform. If these profiles are misconfigured, agents may find themselves unable to participate in warm transfers or group chats, effectively stalling the collaborative processes that rely on immediate, real-time availability. Ensuring that these statuses are correctly mapped across the organization is vital to maintain the integrity of the omni-channel routing logic, which relies on accurate agent state data to make intelligent distribution decisions. Administrative and functional roles represent the final piece of the puzzle, providing the mechanism by which we define what a user is actually permitted to do once they are authenticated. The platform utilizes a role-based access control model where permissions are grouped into roles, and these roles are then assigned to individuals or groups based on their business requirements. It is a best practice to avoid assigning overly broad administrative roles to end users, opting instead to create custom functional roles that contain the fine-grained permissions required for day-to-day operations. Inheritance patterns play a role here as well. Roles can be nested or effectively stacked, but one should be cautious not to create an obfuscated web of permissions that becomes impossible to audit. When an auditor or compliance officer reviews the system state, they should be able to clearly map a user's job function to a specific set of permissions and divisions. By leveraging this combination of role definition and divisional scoping, you create a defensible and transparent access control architecture that satisfies both internal operational needs and external security standards. I look forward to our next session. Hello. In this chapter, we explore the intricacies of Genesys Cloud CX licensing models and the mechanics of managing user roles and permissions. Understanding the distinction between CX1, CX2, and CX3 licensing tiers is foundational for any administrator managing a Genesys Cloud environment. These tiers dictate the available feature sets for your organization, starting with CX1, which focuses on core telephony and basic contact center functionality. Moving to CX2 adds advanced features, like digital channel support and enhanced workforce management capabilities. The CX3 tier serves as the premier offering, unlocking the full potential of the platform, including advanced analytics and sophisticated contact center routing features. When analyzing feature gaps, recognize that some capabilities related to outbound campaigns or advanced interaction routing require the higher tiers to remain accessible. Administrators often encounter friction when attempting to assign features that are simply not included in their current subscription. By maintaining a clear inventory of your organization's assigned licenses, you can preemptively identify potential roadblocks for user access. Always align your business requirements with the appropriate licensing tier before attempting to configure complex omnichannel routing strategies. Misalignment here often leads to unnecessary administrative overhead when you discover mid-configuration that a feature is gated by a licensing restriction. Role-based access control in Genesys Cloud relies on a granular permission system rather than simple flat profiles. You must approach role creation by first auditing the specific tasks an agent or supervisor needs to perform. Rather than relying on default roles, custom role creation allows you to define exact permission mappings that mirror your organizational structure. A permission set defines what an individual is allowed to do, while the division defines the scope of data they are allowed to see. For example, you can create a custom supervisor role that has broad permissions, but restrict their operational scope to specific divisions containing their own team's queues and interactions. When mapping these permissions, remember that many actions require a combination of related settings to function correctly. If a user reports a missing feature in the interface, check the role permissions to ensure the underlying resource definition is authorized. Always follow the principle of least privilege, which dictates that you should grant only the minimum level of access required to complete a job. This proactive approach to security significantly reduces the risk of accidental configuration changes or unauthorized data exposure. The relationship between roles, divisions, and user visibility is where many administrators find the most complexity during initial setup. Divisions act as logical containers that segment your resources, such as queues, flows, and users, within the Genesys Cloud environment. When you link a user to a role, that role provides the ability to perform actions, but the division determines which assets those actions apply to. If an agent is assigned to the finance division and their role denies visibility to the HR division, they will remain completely unaware of entities located within that restricted area. This design is highly effective for large organizations that need to maintain multi-tenancy or strict data silos between departments. Troubleshooting permission issues requires you to investigate both the assigned role and the associated division scope simultaneously. If an administrator cannot view a specific interaction or flow, check if the object resides in a division that is excluded from the administrator's current policy. APIs often provide clearer error messages regarding these restrictions compared to the web user interface, as they explicitly return forbidden status codes tied to specific permission constraints. By systematically checking the scope of the assigned division against the expected resource location, you can resolve most visibility-related tickets quickly. Auditing access rights is a continuous process that ensures your security posture remains intact as your organization grows. Use the audit logs within the admin interface to track changes to roles, permission assignments, and user metadata modifications. If a configuration change appears to have vanished, the audit log will show which user account initiated the change and at what timestamp. This is particularly useful for environment stabilization when multiple administrators share configuration responsibilities. Perform periodic reviews of your custom roles to ensure that inactive permissions or outdated access levels are pruned from the system. When you determine that a user has excessive rights, modify their role mapping rather than creating new, overly specific roles that clutter your configuration. A well-maintained roles catalog simplifies management and makes it easier to onboard new employees with standard access packages. Consistent documentation of why certain roles exist and which divisions they control will save substantial time during future audits. If you find discrepancies that cannot be explained, verify the user's group memberships, as these can indirectly influence access rights through inherited permissions. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this chapter, we will examine how to structure your telephony infrastructure by configuring sites and managing edge appliances. At the core of the Genesys cloud telephony architecture lies the concept of a site, which serves as a logical representation of a physical or geographical location. When you configure a site, you are essentially defining the boundaries for how media is processed and how local resources are grouped together. Every site must contain at least one edge, which serves as the processing unit for voice interactions. By grouping phones and trunks under a specific site, you allow the system to intelligently route audio packets based on proximity and bandwidth availability. This logical partitioning is essential because it informs the system about the physical constraints of your distributed office environments. Without a well-defined site strategy, the platform would struggle to apply correct dial plans or enforce specific emergency routing policies across diverse global locations. The configuration process requires you to specify the address, time zone, and associated edge grouping, which provides the foundation for all subsequent media management. You should view the site as the primary container that determines the capabilities available to the devices and users assigned to that region. Edge appliances act as the bridge between your enterprise voice infrastructure and the Genesys cloud platform, and managing these requires a firm grasp of both hardware and virtual deployment options. An edge can be a physical hardware appliance deployed in your local data center or a virtual machine instance running on supported hypervisors. Regardless of the deployment method, the role remains the same, handling the SIP signaling and the transcoding of media streams. When you group multiple edges together into an edge group, you enable high availability and horizontal scaling for your telephony services. If one edge appliance fails, the other members of the group automatically take over the active calls, ensuring that the impact on callers is minimized. Because high availability is tied to this clustering, you must consider the physical distribution of these edges to avoid downtime during localized outages. Strategic placement of these appliances effectively balances the load across your available bandwidth, which is a critical consideration for large-scale contact centers. Media utilization is a complex topic influenced heavily by the physical location of the edge relative to the desk phone or the trunk it serves. When a user makes a call, the system attempts to keep the media path as local as possible to reduce latency and jitter. Local playback, where audio flows directly between the user's device and the edge, is the preferred method for ensuring call quality. Conversely, remote playback occurs when media must traverse a WAN, often resulting in degraded quality if the network is not appropriately sized. You manage these paths by correctly assigning assets to specific sites, which allows the edge to make intelligent decisions about local versus remote processing. If a branch office is connected to a central edge via a bandwidth-constrained link, the system can be configured to prioritize local call handling to prevent link congestion. Understanding this flow is vital for troubleshooting one-way audio or echoing issues that often arise in poorly planned network topologies. As you evaluate your design, always think about the interaction between the edge and the overall network infrastructure. A robust design ensures that signaling traffic reaches the Genesys cloud fabric while the media stays as close to the participant as possible. This approach provides the flexibility needed to support a hybrid workforce while maintaining the strict quality standards required for voice operations. Properly aligning your edge groups with your organizational site hierarchy is the key to maintaining a performant and resilient telephony environment. As you move forward, keep these relationships in mind, as they form the bedrock of the entire voice experience. Always verify that your network supports the necessary protocols to allow these appliances to communicate securely without unnecessary overhead. By mastering these configurations, you grant yourself the ability to scale your operations predictably. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this chapter, we will explore the nuances of inbound SIP, trunking, and bring your own carrier configurations within the Genesys cloud environment. When we talk about bring your own carrier or BYOC, we are essentially discussing how to bridge your existing telephony provider with the Genesys cloud infrastructure. The primary architectural decision you must make is whether to utilize BYOC cloud or BYOC premises. In the cloud variant, your carrier connects directly to the Genesys cloud edge, which simplifies management by offloading the heavy lifting of maintaining telephony hardware to Genesys. Conversely, the premises model requires the deployment of a physical or virtual edge appliance within your own data center or private cloud environment. This distinction is critical because it dictates where the SIP signaling terminates and how media streams are handled across your network boundary. You must evaluate your security requirements and bandwidth constraints before committing to a specific deployment path. Configuring these trunks requires a robust understanding of SIP parameters and the underlying transport protocols used for signaling. You will generally have the choice between UDP, TCP, and TLS, each offering a different balance of overhead and security. While UDP is the traditional heavyweight of SIP signaling, TCP provides a more reliable connection that handles packet fragmentation better, especially with larger SIP messages. TLS is the preferred choice for production environments, as it encrypts the signaling path, preventing eavesdropping and tampering with sensitive call control information. Authentication methods are equally important, ranging from simple IP-based authentication to more secure digest authentication, using credentials that must be carefully managed within your trunk configuration. Always aim for the highest level of security that your carrier's current infrastructure can support. Mapping your external numbers, whether they are direct inward dialing numbers or toll-free services, requires systematic provisioning within the platform. Once the trunk is established, you must correctly associate these numbers with the appropriate objects in Genesys Cloud to ensure that incoming calls are routed to the intended destinations. This involves configuring the number management area to recognize your DID blocks and linking them to a specific site. Failure to properly map these resources often results in calls dropping at the edge because the platform does not know how to handle an incoming invite destined for an unmanaged number. Precision here is the difference between a functional telephony system and a silence that confuses your callers. Always verify your number assignments after any significant carrier changes. Network security cannot be ignored when opening your telephony infrastructure to the public internet or peering directly with a carrier. You must implement strict IP whitelisting on your firewalls to ensure that only authorized traffic from your carrier reaches the edge or your premises-based equipment. This means knowing exactly which IP ranges your provider uses for their signaling and media gateways and pinning them down in your security policies. Furthermore, you must ensure that your firewall does not inadvertently block the media streams, as the signaling path and the RTP media path may involve different sets of ports. If your media streams are blocked, you will experience the classic symptom of a call connecting where one or both parties have no audio. Rigorous firewall testing is a mandatory step in any professional deployment. Ensuring the health and connectivity of your trunk is the final piece of this administrative puzzle. Genesys Cloud provides built-in mechanisms to monitor the status of your trunks, allowing you to observe if a trunk is in an active state or if it is suffering from connectivity issues. You should regularly audit these monitoring views to identify transient errors or persistent failures that might indicate a misconfiguration or a carrier-side issue. By keeping an eye on trunk health, you can often intervene before your users report a complete loss of inbound capabilities. These status indicators are your primary window into the reliability of your telephony gateway. Treat these metrics as essential operational data for maintaining the integrity of your voice services. I will see you in the next session. Welcome back, and let us now turn our attention to the configuration of telephony infrastructure within Genesys Cloud. In this chapter, we will examine how to manage the hardware and software endpoints that facilitate voice communications for your agents. Deploying WebRTC phones is often the most straightforward way to enable browser-based communication without the overhead of physical devices. When you configure a WebRTC phone in the administration portal, You are essentially creating a virtual endpoint that utilizes the agent's browser as the communication client. The browser handles the media stream directly, which means your network must be prepared to handle real-time traffic efficiently. Because WebRTC communicates via SRTP for media and secure WebSockets for signaling, your security policies must be correctly configured to permit these outbound connections. If the agent's network sits behind a restrictive firewall, the browser may fail to establish a connection to the Genesys cloud media servers. This is where you must understand the role of stun and turn servers, which act as intermediaries to assist in NAT traversal when direct peer-to-peer connectivity is not achievable. Ensuring these traffic flows are prioritized is essential for maintaining the sub-200 ms latency required for high-quality voice interactions. While browser-based solutions are increasingly popular, many contact centers still rely on physical hardware phones from vendors like Poly or audio codes for specific use cases. Managing these physical devices requires a shift from manual configuration toward the use of provisioning templates within the Genesys cloud interface. You define settings such as line appearances, VLAN tagging, and advanced audio parameters within a base template, which is then assigned to individual phone instances. This approach ensures consistency across your entire organizational deployment, as any change to the template propagates to all associated devices during the next provisioning cycle. It is vital to test these templates in a staging environment before pushing updates to your production fleet to avoid unintended service interruptions. When a phone fails to register, you should first inspect the provisioning status and check the log files provided by the phone's own administrative web interface. By standardizing your device configurations, you reduce manual overhead and simplify the troubleshooting process significantly. Troubleshooting telephony infrastructure often leads back to issues with signal path and media packet loss. You might encounter scenarios where an agent is unable to hear the customer, or the connection drops precisely when the interaction begins. These symptoms often point toward a failure in the initial signaling handshake or a blocked media port. Genesys provides a dedicated media helper application, which acts as a bridge to ensure the local machine can accurately negotiate audio codecs and network headers. If the media helper application is not correctly installed or updated, the browser might struggle to offload the audio processing effectively, leading to jitter and echo during live calls. Always verify the status of the local network interface and check that the client machine is not inadvertently routing voice traffic through a VPN, which often adds unnecessary latency. Maintaining a clean network path, free from deep packet inspection or aggressive traffic shaping, remains the gold standard for robust voice quality. Configuration of line appearances and advanced audio settings requires a disciplined approach, especially when dealing with multi-line key systems. Each line appearance must be defined in the phone configuration to ensure that incoming calls are routed to the appropriate bridge, allowing agents to manage multiple simultaneous interactions. Advanced settings, such as jitter buffer controls and digital signal processing options, can be tuned on a per-model basis to improve the audio quality in challenging network environments. If an agent reports poor voice clarity, you should investigate the configured jitter buffer size within the phone settings. Sometimes, a slightly larger buffer compensates for irregular network packet arrival without drastically impacting latency. You should also ensure that your QoS tagging policies are correctly implemented on your local network switches, as Genesys Cloud relies on DSCP markings to prioritize voice traffic over standard data. Rigorous adherence to these configuration patterns ensures that your telephony environment remains stable as your organization grows. See you in the next lecture. Welcome to this chapter on dial plans and emergency routing, where we will master the technical foundations of how Genesys Cloud handles outbound calls and safety. By the end of this section, you will be fully prepared to configure complex telephony routing and ensure compliance with critical emergency service requirements. Building a robust dial plan requires a granular understanding of how Genesys Cloud processes internal and external numbers. At the heart of this system are regular expressions, which allow you to manipulate digit strings before they are transmitted to a carrier trunk. You effectively define patterns that match specific dialed sequences and then transform those sequences into a format the SIP trunk expects. For instance, you might want to strip a leading prefix used for internal testing or normalize a local 7-digit number into a full E164 format. This configuration happens within the dial plan's calling behavior settings, where digit manipulation rules act as the final gatekeeper before a call leaves your environment. If you fail to match the regex correctly, the call may be rejected by the provider due to unexpected formatting. So testing these patterns is a prerequisite for a stable voice implementation. Classification labels represent another layer of complexity that dictates how outbound traffic is categorized for reporting and routing decisions. When you create an outbound route, you assign classifications that signify the nature of the call, such as local, long distance, or international traffic. These labels integrate directly with carrier trunk selection policies, allowing you to prioritize the cheapest route for non-urgent calls while reserving high reliability trunks for premium or critical services. This is not merely an organizational exercise, it is an economic one, as you can balance traffic across multiple carriers based on cost per minute or service level agreements. By associating a specific trunk group with a classification, you ensure that the system dynamically selects the optimal exit point for every interaction. You must align these labels carefully with your underlying provider agreements to avoid unexpected costs or suboptimal routing paths. Emergency dialing, or E911, represents the most vital configuration within your telephony stack, as it bridges the gap between digital systems and physical location data. In Genesys Cloud, you define emergency locations that are tied to specific physical addresses, which are then passed to the public safety answering point during a call. Because the system identifies the user based on their assigned site and phone configuration, you must ensure that each emergency number is mapped correctly to a specific location identifier. If an agent moves to a different office, their emergency routing profile must reflect the new physical coordinates to ensure responders are directed to the correct place. This functionality often requires you to configure emergency calling numbers globally, ensuring that the system can override standard dial plans to route these calls directly to the most appropriate emergency trunk. Accuracy here is non-negotiable, as even a minor mismatch between the provisioned emergency service provider and your internal settings can result in failed dispatch responses. Managing internal extension mapping and cross-site dialing logic requires a cohesive plan that spans across multiple organizational sites. When you have a distributed contact center, you need to establish a dial plan that understands how to resolve short-code internal extensions regardless of which physical site the user is logged into. You achieve this by configuring site-specific number plans that define how to dial between sites while maintaining consistency across the entire organization. Cross-site dialing often involves setting up prefixes that tell the dial plan to route the call over the internal network rather than the public switch telephone network, thereby reducing toll costs. You must also account for digit manipulation for cross-site calls to ensure that the calling party information remains clear to the recipient regardless of where the interaction originates. This holistic approach ensures that your dial plan is not just a collection of disconnected rules, but a unified communication architecture that scales with the business. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome to this deep dive into resource divisions, where we will master the art of partitioning your Genesys cloud environment. We will explore how to logically separate your organizational objects to enforce strict boundaries and ensure that your administrative control is both granular and scalable. In any complex enterprise environment, you quickly encounter the need to delegate administrative authority without granting global access to every user or object. Resource divisions provide this exact capability by acting as a container-based security mechanism that isolates specific objects from the rest of the organization. When you place a user, queue, or flow into a division, you are essentially determining the visibility and management scope for administrators. This is not merely an organizational preference. It is a critical security architecture that prevents unauthorized changes to mission-critical routing components. For instance, if you have a multi-tenant or multi-departmental setup, you want to ensure that the marketing department cannot accidentally modify an inbound flow belonging to the technical support team. By leveraging divisions, you create clear administrative silos that significantly reduce the blast radius of potential configuration errors. The implementation process starts by defining your division structure, which should mirror your organizational hierarchy or your operational requirements. Objects such as queues, flows, scripts, and even number plans can be individually assigned to one or more divisions. A crucial point to remember is that every object must reside in a division. If you do not explicitly assign one, the object defaults to the home division. This default behavior often leads to visibility issues if administrators do not realize that objects are being created in the root container by default. When troubleshooting, the first step is always to verify the division assignment of the object in question compared to the permissions granted to the administrator's assigned role. If an administrator cannot see a specific resource, it is almost certainly because their role lacks the mandatory permissions for that specific division. Scaling this approach for a large organization requires more than just assigning objects. It demands a rigid adherence to naming conventions. When multiple branches of a company share a single Genesys cloud instance, the lack of a standardized naming policy leads to confusion during reporting and maintenance. You should implement a prefixing strategy that explicitly identifies the division or business unit to which an object belongs. For example, rather than naming a queue simply support, you might use IT Support North or OPS Support South. This simple practice ensures that when you pull analytics reports, you can instantly filter and correlate data without digging into individual underlying configurations. Because divisions do not automatically categorize your reports, consistent naming acts as an essential metadata layer that simplifies your operational workflow in the long run. Finally, consider the relationship between roles and divisions when designing your access control strategy. A role effectively defines what an administrator can do, while a division defines where they can do it. This decoupling is powerful, but it introduces complexity if you take a fragmented ad hoc approach. You should aim to group your users into roles based on their functional duties, and then apply those roles only to the specific divisions where they need to operate. Avoid the urge to create overly complex role division permutations that become impossible to audit. Keep your permissions as lean as possible, regularly reviewing who has access to which divisions. By maintaining a clean and intentional structure, you ensure that as your organization grows, your administrative overhead remains manageable and your data security remains robust. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome back to our exploration of the Genesys Cloud Platform. In this session, we will focus on the practical management of telephone numbers and internal extensions within your organization. Managing your inventory of direct inward dialing numbers and toll-free assets is a foundational responsibility for any system administrator. Genesys Cloud treats these numbers as logical assets that must be associated with specific geographical or logical sites before they can be routed to an IVR flow or a specific user. When you provision these numbers, they are imported into the Inventory Management Console, where you perform the critical task of labeling them to identify their purpose, such as support lines, executive lines, or marketing campaigns. Every number must have a destination, which is typically configured through an architect flow. If a number remains unassigned, it essentially sits in a dormant state, consuming administrative focus without providing any utility to your contact center operations. A proactive administrator regularly audits these digital assets to ensure that inventory levels match current business requirements. Extensions play a slightly different role in the telephony architecture, as they provide a short dial mechanism for internal communication between users. You can assign specific numeric extensions to individual user profiles, which allows for streamlined internal transfers and direct dialing between teams. These extensions must be accounted for within your site dial plan to ensure that the Genesys Edge nodes correctly identify the intended destination when a call is placed. When you associate an extension with a user, you are effectively creating a logical map that translates a short digit string into a valid session initiation protocol endpoint. Consistency is key here, especially in environments with multiple sites, as duplicate extensions across different locations can cause routing ambiguity. You should always document your internal numbering schemes to avoid overlapping ranges that might confuse the edge telephony service. Managing number pools for outbound caller identification is a nuanced task that heavily influences your contact center's reachability. When you initiate outbound campaigns, the platform allows you to utilize specific numbers from your inventory to ensure that the caller identity presented to the customer is relevant to the nature of the call. This is often referred to as caller ID masking, where the system dynamically selects a number from a defined pool based on the campaign's configuration. This requires careful coordination between your global number settings and site-specific availability to ensure that the outbound edge has the necessary authority to present these numbers to the public switched telephone network. If you fail to map the correct originating number to the site that handles the outbound traffic, the call may be rejected by the provider or fail to reach the intended recipient altogether. Proper organization of these pools allows you to scale your outbound operations globally while maintaining a localized presence for your end customers. Decommissioning unused numbers is just as significant as the initial provisioning process to prevent clutter and reduce unnecessary service costs. Periodically, you will find that certain sequences are no longer required due to marketing cycles ending or organizational restructuring. In the Genesys Cloud Administration interface, you have the ability to identify these orphaned assets through regular inventory reviews. Once identified, you should remove any associated routing flows or user assignments before returning the number to the active pool or releasing it from the carrier service entirely. Failure to prune your inventory leads to a bloated configuration where searching for valid assets becomes unnecessarily complex and error-prone. This lifecycle management ensures that your numbering plan remains lean, effective, and perfectly aligned with your current production needs. Understanding how these elements interact with your site configurations and SIP trunks is essential for maintaining seamless inbound delivery. Every number, extension, or pool entry is bound by the rules defined within the site level, which dictates how the Genesys Cloud Edge behaves for that specific geographic or logical location. When a call arrives, the Edge service validates the incoming number against the known inventory and then follows the hierarchy of your routing logic to determine the final destination. If you experience issues with inbound calls not completing, the first place to verify is the site-level inbound SIP trunking configuration and the associated number assignment. By keeping your site settings synchronized with your inventory management records, you ensure that every incoming request finds its target without delay. This structural discipline is what transforms a collection of individual settings into a coherent and reliable global telephony system for your users. We'll see you in our next session. Welcome to this exploration of Genesys Cloud CX routing, where we will examine how queuing architectures actually function in a production environment. In this chapter, we focus on the mechanics of automatic call distribution and the precise configuration of queues to manage interaction flow. If you are aiming to master the Genesys Cloud CX platform, understanding how to configure queues effectively is your most critical competency. This course is meticulously designed to bridge the gap between basic platform knowledge and the expertise required to pass the professional certification exam. By dissecting complex routing logical structures and practical queue management, you will gain the clarity needed to optimize customer experiences. We will guide you through every administrative nuance, ensuring you can architect flows that are both scalable and operationally sound. Join us to transform your Genesys Cloud administration skills into a strategic asset for your organization. At the heart of the Genesys Cloud CX routing engine lies the concept of the queue, which acts as a logical construct for gathering interactions before they reach an available agent. When we speak about automatic call distribution, or ACD, we are essentially defining the business rules that govern how these interactions wait and which specific resources are identified as eligible to service them. Configuring a queue requires more than just assigning members. It necessitates a deep understanding of service-level targets, which dictate the percentage of interactions we aim to answer within a defined time frame. Alerting timeouts are equally important, as they determine how long the system will attempt to present a specific interaction to an agent before reconsidering the eligibility pool or reprioritizing the interaction. By setting these parameters, you are effectively tuning the responsiveness of your contact center to match the expectations of your enterprise. Managing queue membership involves a deliberate administrative approach to grouping resources based on their capabilities and access rights. Beyond simple assignments, you must define the interaction handling behaviors that vary significantly between voice and digital media types, such as web chat or email. For instance, voice interactions are inherently synchronous and require immediate attention, whereas digital channels often allow for multitasking and different concurrency thresholds. You should also consider how occupancy metrics, which measure the percentage of time an agent spends handling interactions versus being available, influence your overall staffing requirements. Abandon rates provide the necessary feedback loop to understand if your service level targets are realistically set, as a high abandon rate often indicates that customers are disconnecting due to extended wait times. When you align these metrics with your chosen wrap-up codes, you establish a standardized framework for categorizing the outcome of every customer encounter. Wrap-up codes are not merely administrative post-interaction tasks, but serve as the foundational data points for your reporting and analytics ecosystem. By requiring agents to categorize interactions, you enable the organization to track specific customer intent and operational outcomes without needing to listen to call recordings manually. It is essential to configure wrap-up code triggers that automatically prompt the agent, ensuring that the data is captured immediately while the context of the interaction is still fresh. Consider the implications of default wrap-up settings, as they can inadvertently mask performance issues if not configured to account for various interaction types. When you combine these codes with robust quality management policies, you create a comprehensive view of both the efficiency of your agents and the efficacy of your routing strategies. This balance of automation and manual classification is what differentiates a well-managed queue from one that creates blind spots in your operational performance. When troubleshooting issues within the ACD environment, look directly at the interaction flow within the Architect tool to see how it interacts with the queue settings you have provisioned. The hierarchy of routing is generally determined by the flow's instructions, but the queue configuration acts as the final gatekeeper for actual interaction distribution. If you find that interactions are failing to hit their service level targets, investigate whether your alerting timeouts are too aggressive or if the occupancy of your available agents has hit a threshold that prevents them from accepting new work. Remember that digital media types might use different pacing mechanisms compared to voice, so segment your testing accordingly to ensure that service levels remain stable across every channel. By maintaining a clear separation between media handling behaviors and general queue settings, you can preserve the integrity of your metrics even as you introduce new communication channels to your contact center environment. See you in the next lecture. Hello, and welcome to our exploration of advanced routing strategies within the Genesys cloud environment. In this chapter, we will master the intricacies of skills-based and Bullseye routing to ensure your interactions reach the most qualified resources. Skills-based routing functions by matching the specific requirements of an interaction against the proficiencies defined for your agents. When you configure a skill, you assign it a proficiency level, typically ranging from 1 to 5, which represents the agent's capability or experience within that specific domain. This granularity allows the system to prioritize agents who are not merely capable of handling the interaction, but who excel at it, thereby improving first contact resolution rates. When an interaction enters an ACD queue, the routing engine evaluates the participant attributes and compares them against the agents currently logged in and in an available status. If multiple agents possess the necessary skills, the system applies further logic, such as the longest idle time, to determine the optimal recipient. You must remember that skill requirements are defined within the Architect flows and can be dynamically adjusted based on caller input or metadata retrieved from your CRM systems. Effective management of these skill sets requires a careful balance, as overcomplicating your taxonomy can lead to routing inefficiencies and unintended delays in wait times. By keeping your skill hierarchy clean and strictly relevant to business outcomes, you ensure that the load is distributed predictably across your workforce. Proper implementation turns routing from a mechanical task into a strategic lever that aligns your operational costs with your customer service goals. Bullseye routing provides a sophisticated method for managing how your agent pools expand during periods of high demand or interaction aging. The strategy is built upon a series of concentric rings, where the inner ring contains your most preferred or specialized agents. As the interaction remains in the queue for a specified duration, the system automatically expands the search to subsequent rings, thereby increasing the pool of potential agents. This approach ensures that you always attempt to deliver the interaction to the most skilled resource first, while providing a safety net to prevent excessive customer wait times. You define these rings within the queue configuration settings, assigning specific skill expressions or agent groups to each stage of the progression. The beauty of this model lies in its ability to automate escalation without requiring manual intervention from supervisors or complex architectural logic. If an interaction reaches the final ring, you can configure the system to route it to any available agent, ensuring that the call is answered regardless of specific expertise. This layering strategy is particularly effective for managing seasonal spikes or unforeseen surges in contact volume. By carefully tuning the timer settings for each ring, You can balance the necessity of high-quality service with the practical realities of queue throughput. Beyond standard skill-based and Bullseye configurations, Genesys Cloud offers advanced routing logic to refine your interaction handling process. Preferred agent routing is a powerful feature that identifies when a caller has a historic connection to a specific employee based on past interactions or account ownership. When this setting is enabled, the system prioritizes the interaction for that specific individual, provided they are available, before falling back to the standard queue logic. Predictive routing takes this a step further by utilizing artificial intelligence to analyze historic performance data and behavioral patterns to predict the best outcome for a specific interaction. By evaluating thousands of potential matches, it assigns the interaction to the agent who is statistically most likely to achieve targets such as positive sentiment or short handle times. While these models are highly automated, they still require a solid foundation of well-defined queues and properly assigned skills to function effectively. You should treat these tools as enhancements to your existing routing taxonomy rather than replacements for fundamental queue structure. Continuous monitoring of your routing efficacy through performance analytics will reveal if your predictive models are delivering the expected business value. Aligning these technical capabilities with your organizational priorities is the hallmark of a successful Genesys cloud deployment. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome to this deep dive into architect flow design, where we build the logical foundation for your customer's journey. By mastering these fundamentals, you will elevate your ability to design robust routing strategies that translate complex business requirements into elegant, automated experiences. When you open the architect interface, you are stepping into a deterministic environment that behaves much like a visual programming language. The primary objective here is to understand the hierarchy of flow types, such as inbound voice, in-queue, and secure flows, each of which serves a distinct purpose in the orchestration of contact center events. An inbound voice flow acts as the front door for your organization, handling initial interactions before they ever reach an agent, while in-queue flows govern the behavior and wait time experience of a caller waiting for availability. Secure flows are specialized constructs designed to capture sensitive data, like credit card information, without exposing that information to the end agent or a recording media. You must learn to distinguish these types because the system imposes constraints on which actions are permitted within specific contexts, ensuring compliance and operational stability. Building effective logic requires a disciplined approach to control flow, moving away from simple linear paths towards complex, maintainable structures. Decision blocks are your primary instrument for branching logic based on the evaluation of Boolean expressions, effectively turning your flow into a series of interconnected pathways. However, as the complexity grows, nesting too many decision blocks creates the dreaded spaghetti code, which makes auditing and updates nearly impossible. This is where switch statements become indispensable, providing a clean, readable way to handle multiple outcomes based on a single variable or expression. When you need to repeat a sequence of operations until a condition is met or a list is exhausted, task loops provide the necessary iterative power. Always remember that well-structured logic is not just about making the flow work, it is about making it understandable for the next administrator who inherits your configuration. Managing state and data persistence is a critical aspect of architect design that often separates novice implementations from professional-grade ones. Variables in Genesys Cloud carry scope, and understanding the difference between flow, state, and global variables prevents common bugs like unexpected data overwriting or loss of context. Flow variables are ephemeral, existing only for the duration of a single interaction, which makes them ideal for temporary calculations or specific routing metadata. State variables allow you to persist data across specific segments of a flow, while global variables, often used in conjunction with data actions, provide a mechanism to share values across different sessions or interactions. You must manage these carefully, as polluting the global namespace can lead to race conditions where interaction data from one customer inadvertently impacts another. Before you deploy any change to a production environment, the validation tool is your final line of defense against runtime errors. This tool performs a static analysis of your design, flagging issues such as undefined variables, broken connections, or logic that can never be reached. Even if your flow validates perfectly, You must adhere to a strict versioning and publishing strategy to ensure transparency and accountability. Every publish operation creates a point-in-time snapshot, meaning you can revert to a known good state instantly if a recent change behaves unpredictably. This versioning granularity is essential for enterprise environments where multiple architects might be contributing to the same routing solution. By treating your flow configuration as codified logic rather than just a simple drag-and-drop exercise, you significantly reduce the operational risk inherent in contact center modifications. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this session, we will explore the orchestration of inbound voice flows and the mechanisms that govern the caller experience while they wait in a queue. Building a robust inbound voice strategy requires a deep understanding of how architect flows interact with the underlying ACD infrastructure. When an incoming call reaches your platform, architect acts as the primary decision engine, determining whether to offer self-service options, route directly to an agent, or handle specific exceptions before the call even enters the queuing environment. Within these flows, you must map out the logic that validates organizational data, such as checking customer status via data dips, and then routing that interaction to the most appropriate queue. It is vital to maintain context throughout these transitions, ensuring that any collected information, such as account numbers or session tokens, remains attached to the interaction to minimize the need for the customer to repeat themselves once they reach an agent. Every decision node in your flow represents a potential point of friction or success, so precision and logic gates is non-negotiable for anyone aiming to pass the professional certification exam. Once a customer is directed to a queue, the focus shifts to in-queue logic, which represents a critical phase of the customer journey where silence could lead to abandonment. You will need to implement in-queue flows that manage call treatment effectively, starting with the configuration of hold music and intermittent announcements. These announcements serve two purposes: providing transparency regarding wait times and signaling that the system is still actively processing the request. In Architect, you can leverage built-in variables to calculate expected wait time and provide the caller with an estimate, which significantly reduces anxiety during periods of high traffic. By thoughtfully layering these audio assets, you transform an otherwise passive waiting period into a structured experience that upholds the professional standard of your organization's voice presence. High-volume scenarios often strain even the most optimized queues, necessitating the implementation of the exit-to-callback functionality to protect both your service levels and customer satisfaction. Instead of forcing a caller to remain tethered to the phone line when wait times exceed thresholds, you can offer them the option to receive a callback once a qualified agent becomes available. This feature works by capturing the caller's phone number as a parameter and queuing that request as a virtual interaction, allowing the caller to hang up without losing their place in the priority sequence. When the system initiates the callback, Genesys Cloud ensures that the interaction is routed with the existing context, allowing the agent to receive a screen pop that reflects the customer's original journey. Mastering this logic requires a solid grasp of flow variables, specifically how to assign the callback number dynamically and trigger the transition point within the in-queue flow efficiently. Transfer actions serve as the final logical bridge in your voice architecture. Whether sending an interaction to a specific queue, a nested flow for specialized processing, or an external number, a common point of confusion during examinations involves the distinction between a blind transfer and a consultative transfer, as well as how they impact the visibility of interaction data. When you manage a transfer, especially to an external party, you must ensure that the caller's information is passed through correctly, which often involves configuring an outbound transfer segment that strips or retains specific participant attributes as required by your business rules. Maintaining this continuity is essential for reporting, as disjointed transfers can lead to fragmented interaction records that obscure the true performance of your routing logic. By utilizing proper flow design, you ensure that even when an intermediary must take over, the customer journey is perceived as a seamless, singular event, rather than a series of disconnected calls. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. Today we are starting our exploration of audio management within Genesys Cloud. We will discuss how to effectively create, organize, and localize prompts for your IVR flows. In Genesys Cloud, prompts serve as the primary auditory bridge between your automated systems and your customers. At its core, a system prompt is a fixed audio component that remains consistent, while user prompts allow for more granular control over specific interactions. You manage these within the architect interface, where you can either record audio directly through your browser or upload pre-recorded WAV files. It is important to remember that Genesys Cloud has specific requirements for file formats, typically demanding a linear PCM, 16-bit, 8 kHz, or 16 kHz mono WAV file to ensure optimal playback quality across various telephony carriers. When you manage these assets, proper naming conventions are essential because, in a complex contact center environment, having hundreds of loose files quickly leads to technical debt. I often suggest grouping related audio files by intent, such as greeting, error handling, or menu navigation, to keep your repository manageable. If your organization operates in multiple regions, manually managing audio for every language is unsustainable. This is where text-to-speech, or TTS, becomes an indispensable tool. Genesys Cloud integrates with high-quality TTS engines that allow you to generate audio dynamically based on written text, which significantly reduces the time and cost associated with professional voiceovers. By defining language settings in the architect flow, you enable the system to play the appropriate TTS version based on the caller's language selection. When configuring architectural language settings, consider the default language fallback, which ensures that if a specific request cannot be fulfilled in the user's preferred language, the system reverts to a supported language rather than failing silently. Keep in mind that while TTS offers immense scalability, periodic quality checks remain necessary to ensure that the machine-generated pronunciation meets your brand standards. To make your IVR feel truly responsive, you must move beyond static audio and implement dynamic prompt playback. You achieve this by using variables, which let you insert specific data points, such as an account balance, a reservation number, or a caller's name, directly into an audible sequence. By combining a static prompt with a variable that pulls from a data action, such as a customer's last name, you transform a generic interaction into a personalized experience. Within the flow design, you treat these variables as dynamic audio placeholders that the engine stitches together at runtime. While this is computationally efficient, watch out for how the system handles the transition between the static audio file and the TTS-generated variable. If the pacing feels unnatural, it can lead to caller confusion, so always test the flow with a real-time call to verify the cadence of these hybrid prompts. As your IVR environment expands, your strategy for prompt versioning and maintenance becomes critical for stability. You should view your prompt library not as a collection of static files, but as a versioned ecosystem that requires consistent updates. When you need to update a prompt across multiple flows, Genesys Cloud's architecture allows for batch updates, which ensures that a change made to a master prompt propagates through all reference locations. I recommend creating a strategy where you document the purpose and current version of every primary prompt, especially in a multilingual setup where updates must be synchronized across languages. Without a centralized organization, you risk the possibility of different prompts playing in different parts of the same customer journey. By maintaining a clean and orderly prompt repository, you simplify the troubleshooting process for your administrators and ensure a professional, cohesive brand voice throughout the entire interaction experience. We'll see you in the next session. Welcome back. In this chapter, we will explore the mechanisms of data actions and how they bridge the gap between Genesys Cloud and external systems to enable intelligent, data-driven routing decisions. Data actions serve as the fundamental integration layer in Genesys Cloud, allowing architect flows to interact with external REST APIs during a live interaction. When you call an external system, you are essentially creating a bridge that carries specific information from or to an application like a CRM or an ERP. Before a data action can execute, it must be properly defined within an integration instance in the Genesys Cloud Admin panel. This involves specifying the base URL of the service, the required authentication headers, and the security credentials, such as OAuth tokens or API keys, needed to access the target system. Once the integration is established, you construct the data action itself, which specifies the request method, the URL path, and any mandatory input parameters that the flow will provide when calling the action. Constructing the request structure is only the beginning, as you must also define the translation of the JSON response coming back from the external server into architect variables. When an external service returns a JSON payload, Genesys Cloud expects a schema definition that maps specific JSON properties to variables that architect can understand and consume. For example, if you query a customer database, you will likely receive a JSON object containing fields like account status, balance, or subscription tier. You use JSON path expressions to reach into the response body and extract these values, effectively making them available for conditional branching within your flow. If the response structure does not match your schema, the integration will fail to parse the output, meaning accuracy in your mapping definitions is just as critical as the connectivity itself. Authentication is the gatekeeper of any integration, and Genesys Cloud provides a robust framework to handle credentials securely without hard-coding sensitive strings inside your flows. For many standard cloud-based APIs, Genesys Cloud uses OAuth 2.0, where you provide the client ID and secret within the integration configuration, and the system automatically handles the token procurement and refresh cycle for you. This abstraction significantly simplifies your workload, as you no longer need to write complex logic to manage token expiry or authorization headers manually. When dealing with custom ERPs or legacy middleware, you might encounter custom headers or different security protocols, which the Data Action Builder can adapt to by allowing custom header definitions. Always ensure that the user account associated with the data action has the minimum required permissions necessary to perform its specific task, adhering to the principle of least privilege. Error handling is an often overlooked aspect of integration design that distinguishes a fragile flow from a resilient one. When you invoke a data action, outcomes are rarely guaranteed to be successful every single time, as networks can suffer latencies or external servers can encounter outages. Within the architect flow, you must implement logic to capture the success or failure output of the data action, typically by checking the status code or the output variables returned by the call. If an action fails or triggers a timeout, you should provide a graceful fallback, such as routing the caller to a general queue or prompting them for more information manually. Good design dictates that you treat every inbound data request as a potential point of failure, setting custom timeout values that are appropriate for the expected response speed of your external infrastructure. Testing your integrations is an iterative process that should occur both within the Data Action Builder and as part of end-to-end flow validation. The Data Action Editor includes a rudimentary test interface where you can trigger a request and witness the exact raw request sent and the raw response received, which is invaluable for debugging issues with JSON formatting or authentication headers. Once the data action passes functional tests in isolation, you must transition to testing the flow itself, ideally with a test account that triggers different conditional paths. Pay close attention to how your flow reacts when the data action takes longer than a few seconds, as the default timeout settings might need adjustment depending on the target system's load. By systematically validating both the data mapping and the flow's resilience to errors, you ensure the integration remains performant under real-world conditions. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this session, we investigate the mechanisms required to ensure regulatory compliance when handling sensitive customer information during live voice interactions. When we design contact center workflows, we must inevitably face the challenge of capturing sensitive data, such as credit card numbers or government identifiers, while maintaining compliance with frameworks like PCI DSS. Genesys Cloud CX provides a robust feature set specifically for this purpose, primarily centered around the concept of secure pauses. A secure pause is a functional interruption to the recording process that prevents audio data from being written to permanent storage during a specific window of time. By proactively managing these gaps in the recording, an organization mitigates the risk of storing prohibited information, which could otherwise lead to severe financial or legal penalties if a data breach occurs. It is not enough to rely on manual agent discipline. We must instead engineer technical safeguards that act deterministically regardless of human intervention. The platform allows us to trigger these pauses either programmatically through Architect or manually through the agent interface, ensuring that the control layer is always tightly coupled with the interaction flow. To implement this through Architect, we utilize the secure pause action within an inbound or outbound flow. This action effectively instructs the recording engine to cease capturing audio for a defined duration or until a specified event occurs within the interaction. Architect acts as the orchestration layer here, where we can define precisely when to enter a secure state based on the specific menu branch the customer has navigated. For instance, in a payment collection scenario, the flow might trigger a secure pause immediately before routing to a payment portal or automated payment application. It is vital to recognize that the secure pause is an instruction to the recording service, meaning that the underlying call itself remains established and active, while only the audit trail is suspended. When the secure window concludes, the system resumes recording seamlessly, providing an uninterrupted record of the conversation while effectively isolating the sensitive data input path from the recording repository. Alternatively, we might encounter scenarios where automation is insufficient, necessitating a manual bridge. Agents can trigger secure pauses via the Genesys Cloud CX interface during a live call if they find themselves manually collecting sensitive information. While this provides flexibility, it introduces a reliance on agent training and adherence to standard operating procedures, which introduces a higher risk of human error compared to an automated architect-driven implementation. Ideally, the architectural design should aim to offload this responsibility from the agent entirely by using self-service flows. By decoupling the collection of sensitive data from the agent's environment, we reduce the scope of PCI compliance for the agent's workstation and the associated recording infrastructure. If manual pauses are strictly necessary, they should be treated as a secondary defense mechanism rather than the primary strategy for managing sensitive data. When considering the relationship between recording policies and privacy, we must look at how these configurations interact with the broader compliance ecosystem. Recording policies are defined at the organizational level and determine whether an interaction is recorded by default, yet the secure pause serves as a surgical override to those global rules. When a secure pause is active, the recording metadata should reflect that the pause occurred, ensuring that auditors can verify that the system was instructed to hide specific segments of the audio. This creates an audit trail that proves to stakeholders that the organization is actively managing its risk exposure. We are not simply turning off the microphone. We are ensuring that the ingestion of audio streams into our storage medium is gated by logic that respects customer privacy mandates. Maintaining this separation is a cornerstone of professional Genesys cloud administration and a prerequisite for passing the certification exam. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. Let us explore the mechanics of capturing interaction outcomes and evaluating performance within Genesys Cloud. This chapter provides foundational knowledge on wrapping up interactions and designing effective evaluation structures to drive operational quality. In the ecosystem of contact center operations, the wrap-up process serves as the bridge between raw interaction data and actionable business intelligence. When an agent concludes a conversation, they assign a wrap-up code, which effectively categorizes the nature of the interaction for future reporting and downstream processing. To make this data meaningful, you should design wrap-up code trees that are hierarchical and granular enough to distinguish between routine inquiries and complex service requests. These codes are not global by default, meaning you must link them to specific queues based on the needs of the department or business unit. By doing so, you ensure that agents only see the codes relevant to the interaction type they are currently handling, which reduces noise in your datasets. This granular visibility allows supervisors to filter performance reports by specific outcomes, such as identifying a spike in billing disputes versus general account updates. Remember that consistency in these structures across the organization is key to avoiding fragmented analytics, so plan your taxonomy before deploying it. Beyond categorization, the quality management aspect relies on the robust construction of evaluation forms that translate agent performance into measurable metrics. Creating an evaluation form involves defining specific criteria, determining the appropriate question types, and assigning weights to these components. Question types can range from checkboxes for binary tasks to scoring scales that allow for nuanced assessment of soft skills and adherence to compliance protocols. You must be strategic with weighted scoring, ensuring that categories with higher business impact receive a larger percentage of the total score. Furthermore, you will encounter the concept of critical fail items, which are mandatory requirements that, if not met, result in an automatic failure or a predefined point deduction regardless of the overall score. These items are indispensable when measuring adherence to legal requirements or security standards, where failure is simply not an option. Once your evaluation forms are finalized, they must be integrated into the post-interaction workflow to facilitate meaningful coaching sessions. This integration involves establishing policies that trigger the creation of an evaluation observation or assignment after an interaction is completed and recorded. By surfacing these evaluations directly to supervisors within the performance dashboard, you create a seamless loop that moves from interaction data to qualitative review. A well-designed workflow ensures that coaching is based on targeted data points rather than subjective impressions of agent performance. You are essentially building a feedback mechanism where the scoring of interaction outcomes informs whether an agent needs additional training or if they are exceeding performance expectations. This systematic approach allows you to scale quality assurance across large teams while maintaining the individual attention necessary for professional development. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome to this chapter regarding the configuration of email and web-based omnichannel interactions within Genesys Cloud CX. We will explore the technical requirements for internalizing digital communication channels and the architectural decisions behind modern engagement models. Configuring inbound email in Genesys Cloud requires a solid understanding of how the platform maps external domains to internal routing addresses. When you set up an email domain, you are primarily verifying ownership through SPF and DKIM records to ensure that your organization's communications are authenticated and reach their destination without being marked as spam. Once the domain is validated, you define specific support addresses that act as entry points for inbound traffic. These addresses must be associated with an email flow within Architect, which acts as the intelligent bridge between the raw message and the appropriate queue. It is here that you define the logic for auto responses and dictate how the system should handle incoming attachments. By separating the SMTP configuration from the architectural routing logic, Genesys Cloud provides a clear structure that remains consistent even as your organization adds more support domains over time. Maintaining this separation is essential for auditability and for managing complex environments where different departments might need unique email branding or distinct response personas. Threading logic is a critical component of email management that determines how subsequent messages are grouped to provide continuity. Genesys Cloud uses specific headers and metadata to correlate incoming emails with existing interaction IDs, ensuring that an agent can see the history of the conversation thread rather than treating every message as a new ticket. You configure these settings at the domain level, defining the window of time during which new messages are considered part of an ongoing conversation. Proper configuration prevents fragmentation of customer interactions, which is often a source of frustration. If your threading settings are too restrictive, you end up with orphan transcripts that confuse agents and dilute the quality of the interaction. Conversely, overly broad settings might merge unrelated inquiries. So finding the right balance based on your typical resolution time is key to efficient administration. You must always test these settings during your implementation phase to observe how the system interprets reply headers sent from common third-party mail clients. When moving toward web engagement, you must distinguish between the legacy chat architecture and the modern web messaging deployment. The legacy chat system is inherently synchronous, meaning both the customer and the agent must be present and active for the interaction to continue effectively. In contrast, modern web messaging is asynchronous by design, allowing the customer to close their browser and return later without losing the session context. This shift from synchronous to asynchronous communication fundamentally changes how you configure the engagement model within your environment. You implement web messaging by deploying a script snippet to your website, which registers the deployment against your Genesys Cloud organization. This snippet acts as the entry point, allowing you to control styling, proactive invitations, and the behavioral attributes of the widget. Understanding this distinction is vital because the choice affects not only the customer experience, but also how you report on performance metrics and configure queue utilization. The deployment of these chat widgets or messaging interfaces requires careful planning regarding the user experience on your storefront. When you add a deployment configuration in the admin interface, you are defining the environment in which the chat session exists, including which queues are targeted and what specific authentication mechanisms are available. For standard web chat, you typically rely on the widget's built-in capabilities to pass data, while web messaging leverages the Genesys Cloud Messenger to provide a persistent, transcript-based history. By using the deployment snippet provided in the administration panel, you inject the necessary JavaScript into your site's header or footer, enabling immediate connectivity to the Genesys cloud infrastructure. Security is also a major consideration here, as you must configure allowed domains to prevent unauthorized cross-origin requests from initiating sessions against your deployment. This level of control ensures that your chat infrastructure is only accessible from trusted environments, maintaining the integrity of your customer support channels while providing a seamless entry point for digital interaction. I will catch you at our next session. Welcome to our exploration of text-based communication channels within Genesys Cloud. In this chapter, we will master the intricacies of SMS and social messaging integration to build a truly omni-channel customer experience. Digital messaging represents the modern primary touchpoint for customer service, and mastering these integrations is essential for any Genesys Cloud professional. We begin by examining the provisioning of SMS services, which can be accomplished either through Genesys Cloud natively or by leveraging third-party messaging brokers. When you select the native option, Genesys acts as the primary service provider, simplifying the management of long codes and toll-free numbers directly within the administration interface. Conversely, third-party brokers provide greater flexibility if your organization already holds existing relationships or requires specific international carriers. Regardless of the chosen path, the underlying mechanism involves registering your numbers and ensuring that the platform verifies ownership before routing any production traffic. This ensures that your brand identity remains secure and that messages are delivered reliably to your customers regardless of the carrier network involved. Transitioning to social networking platforms such as WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and Line requires a distinct approach compared to traditional SMS. The integration process is heavily dependent on configuring the appropriate credentials and webhooks within the Genesys Cloud Administration menu to establish a secure handshake with the respective service providers. Once you link an organizational social account to the platform, Genesys Cloud begins to treat these interactions as asynchronous messaging sessions rather than standard phone calls. This abstraction remains a critical concept to grasp because it dictates how the system tracks context over time. Because these platforms offer unique native capabilities, the integration must ensure that the Genesys Cloud platform can interpret the specific metadata and message structure unique to each provider. Careful architectural planning at this stage prevents technical debt and ensures that your messaging strategy remains scalable as you onboard additional social channels in the future. Configuring automatic call distribution for these digital channels requires a shift in how you categorize and prioritize incoming interactions. Unlike voice, where you can rely on ring-no-answer timers to move an interaction to the next available agent, messaging is inherently asynchronous and often involves long periods of inactivity. You must define specific routing workflows and architect that account for these characteristics, ensuring that the system logic appropriately queues the message while maintaining accurate service-level objectives. Skills-based routing remains a cornerstone here, allowing you to assign messages to agents who possess the specific expertise required to handle complex queries from social channels. Furthermore, your routing design must handle the persistence of social media threads correctly, ensuring that a returning customer's entire history remains visible to the agent. Without this, the agent experience suffers, and the customer is forced to repeat context, which directly undermines the value provided by omnichannel integration. Managing rich media is arguably the most dynamic aspect of modern messaging, as customers increasingly expect to share images, location coordinates, and document files. Genesys Cloud supports these rich media types through its messaging interface, but you must ensure that your routing and agent workspace configurations are explicitly set up to handle incoming payloads. When an agent receives an interaction with an image or a location pin, the Genesys Cloud agent interface renders this content natively, providing a consistent experience regardless of whether the customer initiated the chat from WhatsApp or a standard SMS conversation. This uniformity is a vital component of the agent experience, as it prevents the toggling between disparate tools or interfaces while the agent handles an active customer thread. You should verify that your organizational security policies permit these types of data exchanges, as the handling of files often requires specific permissions and storage configurations. Consistent experience across channels is not just a user interface preference, but a functional requirement to maintain high agent productivity and satisfactory customer resolution times. By mastering these integrations, you solidify your ability to design robust and scalable messaging architectures. See you in the next lesson. Hello, and welcome back. Today, we move our focus to the operational core of Genesys Cloud CX by exploring the intricacies of workforce management. Workforce management is essentially the art of balancing supply and demand within your contact center to ensure consistent service delivery while maintaining operational efficiency. At its foundation, Genesys Cloud CX relies on historical volume data to project future interaction trends, which necessitates accurate data uploads to ensure your forecasting models remain grounded in reality. When you import historical data, the system evaluates interaction volumes, average handle times, and arrival patterns to create a baseline for future predictions. A well-constructed forecast does not just predict the number of incoming contacts. It calculates the precise headcount required to hit your specific service level goals. If you set a goal of answering 80% of calls within 20 seconds, the WFM engine translates this service level objective into the required staffing numbers for every interval of the day. This relationship is strictly mathematical, meaning that even minor inaccuracies in your historical data or arrival assumptions will propagate through the model and lead to understaffing or overstaffing. By understanding how the engine interprets these service level targets, you can better manage your staffing buffers to account for unavoidable spikes in incoming volume. Once the system has calculated the number of agents required, the transition to scheduling begins through the implementation of work plans and shift assignments. Work plans serve as the structural framework, defining the rules under which agents operate, such as their preferred shift times, maximum daily hours, and required break durations. Within the system, these plans allow you to configure recurring schedules that automatically generate shift patterns, ensuring that the necessary headcount is present during peak business hours. Often, your agents will need flexibility, and the system facilitates this via shift trades, allowing staff to exchange their scheduled hours without compromising your overall coverage goals. These trades must still adhere to your predefined work plan constraints to ensure that compliance and labor regulations are not inadvertently violated. Maintaining these schedules requires a shift in mindset from static planning to active dynamic management. By leveraging these native scheduling tools, you minimize the administrative overhead of manual roster management while maintaining a balanced workforce distribution that aligns with your predicted interaction volumes. Beyond the initial planning phase, effective management in Genesys Cloud CX requires constant vigilance through the monitoring of real-time adherence. Even the most precise forecast will inevitably face intraday variances, such as unexpected spikes in volume or unplanned agent absences, which divert performance from your projections. Real-time adherence allows you to observe, in the moment, whether your agents are correctly engaged in their scheduled activities, whether that be handling conversations, performing administrative follow-up, or taking their allotted breaks. When variances appear, you must be prepared to make immediate scheduling adjustments to optimize agent utilization and mitigate potential customer wait times. This might involve reassigning agents between queues or granting early breaks when volume dips, thereby preventing waste and ensuring that you are utilizing your human capital effectively. Consistently analyzing these intraday shifts helps you refine your future forecasting, creating a feedback cycle that gradually improves the accuracy of your staffing models over time. Mastering these adjustments is what separates a reactive contact center environment from a proactive, well-optimized organization that consistently hits its performance targets. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Welcome back. We are now turning our focus to quality management, specifically addressing how to define recording policies and manage performance through systematic evaluation. In Genesys Cloud, the effective administration of quality management starts with the creation of robust recording policies based on metadata. These policies act as the primary filter for your interaction data, allowing you to selectively record conversations based on specific attributes such as direction, originating queue, or interaction duration. While it is technically possible to enable global recording, this approach is often inefficient, as it ignores the nuanced needs of different business units. By defining policies that trigger only when specific conditions are met, you reduce storage overhead and focus your efforts on interactions that truly demand analysis. For instance, you might choose to record only inbound interactions that exceed a 2-minute duration to capture meaningful customer data while filtering out short, transactional inquiries that provide little insight for quality assurance teams. Configuring screen recording is another critical component of a comprehensive quality management strategy, providing full interaction visibility that audio alone cannot convey. When you enable screen recording, you are essentially capturing the agent's desktop activity simultaneously with the audio feed, which allows evaluators to assess not just what the agent says, but how they navigate the CRM or other support tools. This capability is particularly useful for identifying gaps in agent training or system usability issues that might be hindering resolution times. It is essential to ensure that your workstation infrastructure supports the necessary bandwidth and that the Genesys cloud user has the correct permissions to facilitate this capture. Remember that screen recording requires the integration of the Genesys Cloud desktop app, which must be deployed consistently across the agent pool to ensure parity in your performance monitoring. Managing storage durations and archival settings is a responsibility that balances compliance requirements with cost optimization. Every recording policy you create allows you to define a retention period, after which the system automatically marks the records for deletion or migration to long-term cold storage. It is vital to consult your organizational legal requirements before setting these durations, as some industries necessitate the retention of records for several years for audit purposes. You should also consider the storage impact of enabling both audio and screen recordings, as screen captures occupy significantly more space relative to audio files. Within the policy configuration, you can assign archival settings that move older files to cloud storage providers, effectively offloading the active storage capacity while still maintaining accessibility for compliance investigators. The Quality Management Dashboard serves as the central hub for your evaluation workflows, enabling you to assign specific forms to agents and track performance trends over time. Standardized scoring methodologies are the backbone of this process. By using consistent evaluation forms, you ensure that every quality analyst is measuring agent performance against the same set of criteria. This objectivity is essential when using data to inform agent coaching sessions, as it provides hard evidence of performance improvements or deficiencies. When you track these scores over time within the dashboard, you can identify systemic issues, such as a drop in customer satisfaction metrics after the introduction of a new product or a change in routing logic. Using these analytics effectively creates a closed-loop system where evaluation data directly influences future training modules and operational refinements. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back to our exploration of the Genesys Cloud CX platform. In this chapter, we will master the configuration and strategic application of speech and text analytics to derive actionable operational insights. To effectively leverage the speech and text analytics engine, we must first configure the core components that process raw interaction data. This process begins by defining the specific vocabularies and keywords that the system should monitor within transcripts, which allows for automated topic spotting across all incoming channels. When you configure automated sentiment analysis, you are essentially instructing the Genesys engine to evaluate both acoustic and linguistic data points. The acoustic analysis measures features such as speaking rate, volume, and pauses, while the linguistic analysis evaluates word choice and syntax to identify states of customer frustration or satisfaction. These inputs are distilled into a calculated sentiment score, providing a quantitative value that represents the emotional arc of an interaction. By setting up these parameters correctly, you transform unstructured voice and chat interactions into structured data that informs your business intelligence. This foundational setup is mandatory for any organization aiming to move beyond manual quality monitoring toward a data-driven service culture. Once the engine is processing these data points, we turn our attention to the utility of the content search tool, which serves as our primary interface for transcript analysis. The content search tool allows administrators and quality managers to input specific keywords or phrases to instantly locate every interaction where those terms appear within a transcript. This capability is instrumental for compliance auditing and identifying emerging trends in customer inquiries, such as mentions of a new product or complaints regarding a specific service outage. By creating saved queries in the content search tool, you can create a recurring workflow that alerts you whenever a sensitive topic arises in a high volume of calls. Furthermore, integrating these insights directly into the Genesys Cloud Quality workflow is where the true value lies. You can map specific analytics data, such as high frustration triggers or the presence of specific keywords, directly to quality evaluation forms. This ensures that evaluators focus their limited time on interactions that contain identified markers rather than selecting conversations for review at random. Understanding the underlying mechanics of how these analytics are processed is critical for maintaining high system performance and accurate insight generation. The Genesys system treats acoustic indicators, such as background noise or erratic silence, differently than it handles the linguistic transcription of keywords. When a customer interaction concludes, the system parses the transcript through the lens of your defined topics and markers, then applies the sentiment model to the resulting text. Successful resolution patterns are often characterized by specific sequences of neutral or positive sentiment markers, paired with efficient handling times and the absence of escalation keywords. Conversely, indicators of frustration often manifest through a measurable increase in voice intensity or a decline in the sentiment score during the final moments of a call. By analyzing these data points in tandem, you gain a clearer picture of agent performance, allowing for targeted coaching sessions based on empirical evidence rather than anecdotal observation. This methodical approach ensures that your analytical setup remains robust and relevant to your evolving business needs. See you in the next session. Welcome back. In this lesson, we will explore the mechanisms behind outbound engagement and how to effectively manage your contact data. The foundation of any outbound operation in Genesys Cloud CX resides in the contact list. When importing data, you must define a schema that maps your external file columns to the contact attributes required by the system. It is imperative to ensure that data types are correctly identified during this process, as misconfigured fields can lead to failed dialing attempts or routing errors. Once the file is uploaded, Genesys Cloud validates the records against your defined contact list settings. You should treat the contact list as a dynamic entity rather than a static database, as agents and automated processes will be performing lookups and updates on these records continuously. If your organization relies on external CRMs, you might consider automated list management, but the core import mechanism remains the essential starting point for bulk campaign operations. Always verify that your CSV headers are properly sanitized to prevent ingestion issues, as the system is strictly bound by the integrity of the provided data model. Configuring a campaign involves selecting the appropriate dialing mode, which dictates how the system governs agent workload and call velocity. Predictive dialing uses mathematical algorithms to analyze agent availability and average handle time to place calls before an agent becomes free, thereby maximizing talk time. Progressive dialing operates on a more conservative basis, ensuring that an agent is immediately available before a call is placed, which reduces the occurrence of abandoned calls. Preview dialing offers a balanced approach where the agent is presented with the contact information before the call initiation, providing them with the necessary context to handle the interaction professionally. You must select the mode that best aligns with your regulatory requirements and the specific complexity of your outbound strategy. Each mode interacts differently with the system's pacing algorithms, and understanding these nuances is critical for maintaining an equilibrium between efficiency and customer experience. To ensure effective interaction, Genesys Cloud utilizes call analysis to differentiate between human pickups and machine responses. This feature is a sophisticated signal processing component that monitors the early stages of a connection to detect the characteristic patterns of an answering machine or a voicemail greeting. When the system identifies a non-human answer, it can be programmed to either disconnect immediately, play an automated message, or route the call to a specialized queue. If you choose to leave a message, the configuration must allow for accurate detection of the tone, which can sometimes be obscured by noisy line conditions. Improper calibration of call analysis can lead to silent calls or incorrect dispositions, both of which negatively impact your connection rates. It is necessary to test these responses periodically to ensure that the detection logic remains accurate as telephony provider standards and signaling methods evolve. Compliance is a non-negotiable aspect of mass communication, requiring strict adherence to legal frameworks such as the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. The primary tool for this is the Do Not Call list, which acts as a global exclusion filter applied to all outbound operations. Beyond global lists, you may implement campaign-specific or wrap-up-based exclusions to honor customer requests made during previous interactions. The pacing system also plays a role in compliance by monitoring the abandon rate, which is the percentage of calls that reach a customer but are disconnected because no agent was available. You should configure the campaign to throttle its dialing speed automatically if the abandon rate approaches predefined thresholds required by regional regulations. By prioritizing these governance controls, you mitigate risk while maintaining a sustainable volume of outbound activity that respects legal boundaries and consumer preferences. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome to this focused exploration of advanced campaign logic and the precise orchestration of automated outbound sequences within Genesys Cloud. In this chapter, we transition from basic campaign setup toward the sophisticated automation required for complex enterprise communication strategies. You will learn to architect sequences that handle multiple list executions, implement dynamic rule sets, and optimize your contact strategies through precise data filtering. Mastering these capabilities is essential for any professional aiming to pass the certification exam, as it demonstrates your ability to move beyond simple dialing and into the realm of intelligent, data-driven interaction management. By the end of this module, you will be well-equipped to configure high-performance outbound environments that align perfectly with business outcomes. When we discuss campaign sequencing, we are essentially defining a deterministic workflow that determines how Genesys Cloud processes multiple contact lists in a specific professional environment. Rather than relying on manual intervention to switch between lists, a sequence acts as a state machine that progresses from one list to another based on predefined transition triggers. The power of this approach lies in its ability to automate transitions once a specific list reaches its completion criteria, such as a percentage of records dialed or a total exhaustion of reachable numbers. You must configure these sequences with care, ensuring that each step maintains the desired pacing and agent availability constraints required by your organization. This functional automation allows organizations to maintain continuous outbound activity without administrative overhead. Beyond mere sequencing, the real intelligence of an outbound operation manifests in the application of rule sets, which allow for real-time contact strategy adjustments based on live call results. A rule set is composed of a series of conditions and actions that inspect every single interaction outcome as it happens in the live dialer environment. For example, if a campaign records a high frequency of busy signals or a specific set of negative outcomes, a rule can be triggered to dynamically modify the retry logic or adjust the pacing settings without stopping the campaign. This dynamic adjustment ensures that your contact strategy remains reactive to the actual behavior of the target population at any given moment. By defining these logical mappings, you prevent the waste of agent time on unproductive dials, thereby maximizing the total effective contact percentage. Contact list filters serve as a critical secondary layer of intelligence, enabling you to segment your broad outreach data into actionable subsets without requiring a complete upload or re-import of your database. A filter acts as a virtual view over your contact list, where you define criteria based on contact attributes such as location, time zone, or prior interaction history. When you apply a filter to a campaign, the dialer ignores all records that do not meet your specific logic, allowing you to target high-priority segments during specific windows of time. This level of granularity is particularly important when you need to align your outbound efforts with specific local regulations or business hours in diverse geographic regions. By utilizing filters, you treat your contact lists as dynamic, reusable assets rather than static, unyielding files. Once an interaction concludes, the closing status is captured through wrap-up codes, which we must effectively map to outbound interaction outcomes to ensure our reporting stays accurate. Wrap-up mapping allows the system to bridge the gap between agent activities and campaign metrics, effectively feeding the analytics engine with granular data about why a call ended. Proper configuration involves assigning specific wrap-up codes to logical categories, ensuring that the system understands the distinction between a successful reach, a request for a follow-up, or a permanent opt-out. When this mapping is configured correctly, your monitoring of key performance indicators like connect rates and effective contact percentages becomes highly reliable. Without this data integrity, your attempts to optimize the campaign via rule sets or sequencing will lack the necessary empirical foundation for success. Monitoring success metrics requires a disciplined look at the performance dashboard to confirm that your sequencing and rules are yielding the expected behavior over a reasonable time horizon. You should monitor the relationship between the calls placed and the actual connects made, while specifically filtering for those records considered valid contacts. A high call volume is often a misleading metric if the connect rate remains stagnant or, worse, declines due to inefficient targeting or overdialing. By reconciling these metrics against your rule set triggers, you can iteratively improve your contact strategy until the ratio between resource consumption and outcome generation is balanced according to your specific business requirements. Achieving this balance is a core competency that differentiates a seasoned administrator from a casual user. See you in the next lecture. Welcome to the chapter on Agent Coaching and Development Tools, where we will explore how to translate evaluation insights into actionable improvement plans. In this section, we will cover the strategic use of the coaching module to bridge the gap between quality monitoring and actual performance growth. If you are aiming to master the Genesys Cloud CX platform, understanding how to transition from simple monitoring to active development is critical for professional certification. This chapter is designed to provide you with the technical knowledge required to configure and leverage native coaching tools to maximize agent proficiency. By the end of these lessons, you will be well equipped to implement structured training cycles that directly influence key performance indicators. We will focus on the practical application of development modules and the creation of persistent feedback loops between your quality scoring system and your workforce training objectives. The coaching module in Genesys Cloud serves as the primary mechanism for formalizing the relationship between quality evaluations and individual training sessions. When a supervisor identifies a deficit in an agent's performance, they can use the coaching feature to schedule a specific session linked directly to a recorded interaction. This linking is not merely administrative, as it provides the agent with immediate context regarding the exact behavior being addressed. By selecting a specific recording, the manager anchors the training in reality rather than subjective opinion. This direct association ensures that the agent understands the disconnect between their current performance and the expected standards of the contact center. Furthermore, these sessions can be tracked through the user interface, providing a transparent history of completed and pending development goals. Effective use of this feature turns a potentially uncomfortable performance conversation into a collaborative effort towards skill mastery. Tracking agent progress through development modules requires a disciplined approach to how we aggregate data within the system. You have the capability to create structured development programs that align with both departmental objectives and individual career paths. By assigning specific modules to an agent, you create a tangible timeline for improvement that the system can monitor automatically. As the agent completes the necessary steps, the supervisor gains visibility into the pace of their development, allowing for timely interventions if progress stalls. This methodical tracking is essential for justifying workforce engagement efforts to stakeholders, as it provides clear evidence of how individual growth contributes to broader organizational targets. It is not enough to simply assign training. One must ensure that the structure of the module facilitates measurable outcomes that correlate with improved service delivery. Assessing the impact of coaching is the ultimate step in closing the loop on workforce engagement and system maturity. You must carefully define which key performance indicators will be monitored, such as average handling time, first contact resolution, or customer satisfaction scores. When an agent undergoes a coaching session focused on a specific competency, the system allows you to compare their performance metrics before and after the intervention. Without this comparative analysis, the coaching process remains theoretical and disconnected from the operational success of the center. You will find that when adjustments relate back to verified performance trends, the agents tend to be more receptive to feedback and more motivated to demonstrate change. This analytical rigor transforms the coaching module from a simple scheduling utility into a strategic instrument for performance stabilization. Creating a continuous feedback loop between quality monitoring results and workforce development is the hallmark of a mature Genesys Cloud administrator. In a well-designed environment, the scores produced by quality evaluation forms should automatically inform the training agenda for the next periodic review. You should rely on the integration between the evaluation summary and the development backlog to ensure that no agent is left to repeat the same errors over multiple cycles. By setting up triggers and workflows that flag recurring low-scoring interactions, you essentially automate the identification of coaching opportunities. This proactive loop ensures that your training resources are distributed where they will have the greatest impact on contact center proficiency. When you successfully align these two domains, You eliminate guesswork from the training process and move toward a truly evidence-based model of agent empowerment. See you in the next lesson. Welcome back. Let us discuss how to leverage real-time analytics to maintain operational health in Genesys Cloud. Effective supervision in a contact center environment requires moving beyond historical reporting to a state of constant awareness. The Dynamic Views and Dashboards module is designed to provide you with the precision tools necessary to monitor queue health, agent availability, and interaction flows as they happen. We will explore how to translate raw performance data into actionable insights through custom visual interfaces. By mastering these components, you ensure that your team can respond to volatility without waiting for end-of-day reports. This is about operational agility and the ability to steer your contact center toward its service-level objectives in real time. We will cover the configuration of threshold alerts, the customization of widget-based interfaces, and the technical constraints of data granularity. Performance views remain the foundation of real-time monitoring, offering a focused lens on specific entities like queues, agents, or individual interactions. When you access a queue performance view, you are essentially observing the state of your inbound traffic against your staffing capacity. It is important to distinguish between the aggregate views that show site-wide status and the granular views that allow you to troubleshoot individual performance bottlenecks. You can customize these views by adding specific columns or applying filters that hide irrelevant noise, allowing you to focus on metrics like waiting interactions or current agent status. Because these views are dynamic, they provide a live feed of your contact center environment, which is indispensable for floor managers or supervisors adjusting resources throughout the day. I find it helpful to think of these as tactical dashboards that prevent incidents from escalating into systemic failures. Visualizing this data is effectively handled through the dashboard workspace, where you can arrange widgets to track key performance indicators. Each widget serves as a specialized container for data, whether you need a simple gauge to show percentage of service level met, or a more complex trend line showing interaction volume over the last hour. The strength of the dashboard lies in its capability for consolidation, as you can pin multiple queues or agent groups to a single monitor. When you customize your workspace, consider the cognitive load of a supervisor who may be looking at several displays at once. A well-designed dashboard focuses on immediate exceptions, such as long-running interactions or significant spikes in queue length, rather than displaying an overwhelming array of stagnant metrics that require time to decipher. Management by exception is facilitated through the implementation of alarms tied to threshold breaches. You can define specific triggers within the Genesys Cloud interface, such as an alert that fires when the abandon rate exceeds a predefined percentage within a set time window. These alerts can be configured to provide visual notifications directly within the dashboard or through other notification integrations, ensuring that the appropriate personnel are aware of operational risks before they become service failures. It is important to define these thresholds with care. If you set your sensitivity too high, you risk alarm fatigue, where supervisors eventually ignore the alerts due to their constant frequency. Conversely, a threshold set too conservatively might fail to capture meaningful deviations that require urgent interventions like shifting staff between queues or adjusting routing priorities. Effective floor management requires an understanding of how frequently the data refreshes and the granularity of the metrics presented. While the dashboard feels instantaneous, keep in mind that the calculation engines behind these views perform complex data aggregation, and there is a technical interval associated with status updates. Agents and queue metrics typically reflect changes within a very short time frame, but high-volume environments may experience slight variations in how quickly these metrics propagate to the UI. Understanding these intervals is essential when you are in a high-pressure scenario, as making a decision based on raw, cache-sensitive data can occasionally lead to premature actions. Always verify your observations against multiple views if you suspect a lag in the reporting engine. Precision in monitoring is as much about understanding the tool's limitations as it is about knowing how to configure the widgets themselves. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this chapter, we will explore the standard and custom reporting tools available within Genesys Cloud CX to transform raw interaction data into actionable business intelligence. To begin our discussion on reporting, we must first distinguish between the two primary types of reports available in the platform: aggregate and detail reports. Aggregate reports serve as the foundation for high-level management oversight, providing summed values and trends over specific time intervals, such as daily or hourly interaction volumes. These reports are essential for understanding general contact center performance, long-term staffing requirements, and overall service level compliance across queues or agents. In contrast, detailed reports offer a granular view of individual interaction records, capturing the specific lifecycle of a single contact from initiation to wrap-up. While aggregate reports give you the macro view, detail reports are crucial when you need to audit specific agent behaviors or troubleshoot why a particular interaction failed to follow the expected routing logic. Understanding when to query for a sum of interactions versus a list of individual interactions is the first step toward effective data analysis. Genesys Cloud allows you to handle these insights through both scheduled and on-demand generation, providing flexibility depending on your immediate business needs. If you require a static snapshot for a stakeholder meeting, you can trigger an on-demand report in either PDF or CSV format directly from the interface. For recurring requirements, such as a weekly summary report for operations management, the platform supports automated scheduling where the system pushes the data to authorized recipients at set intervals. When configuring these schedules, it is important to consider the underlying filters and parameters because they dictate the accuracy and relevance of your output. Filtering allows you to narrow down results by specific queues, media types, or time zones, ensuring that the data you export is focused on the metrics that matter most to your specific organizational objectives. When standard reports do not provide the specific perspective required for your business, the report builder becomes the primary instrument for creating customized data views. This tool enables you to select specific columns, apply complex metric calculations, and arrange the layout to align with your internal reporting standards. Custom reports are particularly useful when you need to combine data points that are not typically grouped together in the pre-configured templates, such as correlating quality evaluation scores with specific interaction attributes. By mastering the interface of the report builder, you move beyond the constraints of rigid templates and begin to synthesize data that is tailor-made for your organization. This customization ensures that your dashboards and exports provide stakeholders with the exact information necessary to make informed decisions without forcing them to manually parse through irrelevant datasets. Analyzing historical trends requires a disciplined approach to how you handle exported data, especially when preparing it for external stakeholder presentations. Since raw data exported in CSV format often requires further manipulation, you should develop a consistent methodology for importing these files into business intelligence tools or spreadsheet software. You must pay close attention to the time zone settings and the specific metric definitions during this process to ensure that your historical trends remain mathematically valid. When stakeholders look at a chart showing a month-over-month increase in interaction volume, they expect the underlying numbers to be derived from a consistent set of parameters relative to your defined business hours. Therefore, your ability to document and replicate the filtering logic is just as important as your ability to generate the report itself. Mastering the filters and parameters is the final component in producing accurate business intelligence. Every report hinges on the precision of the input criteria, such as the selected period, agent present status, or specific wrap-up codes. If you inadvertently include irrelevant data or omit critical segments, your subsequent trend analysis will be flawed, leading to incorrect conclusions about your contact center efficiency. Consistency is the hallmark of a professional reporting strategy. You want to ensure that if two different administrators draw the same report, they arrive at identical results. By consistently applying the same filters and grouping logic, you establish a baseline of truth that stakeholders can rely on, which is vital for building trust in the reporting system. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this chapter, we will master the intricacies of interaction details and the art of customer journey mapping within the Genesys Cloud environment. When we shift our focus from aggregate performance metrics to individual records, we enter the domain of true operational transparency. The interaction details view acts as the definitive audit trail for every single communication that enters your ecosystem. By navigating to the performance workspace and selecting interaction details, you gain granular visibility into the lifecycle of an interaction. Each record is composed of individual segments that represent discrete periods of activity, such as waiting in a queue, alerting an agent's phone, or the active conversation itself. These timestamps are critical because they allow you to pinpoint precisely where an interaction stalled or deviated from the expected routing path. If a caller reports a long silence or an abrupt disconnection, the metadata contained within these segments provides the objective evidence required to identify the root cause of the failure. Modern customer service is rarely a linear experience, which is why the customer journey view is an indispensable tool for any professional. This feature aggregates historical touchpoints across all channels, providing a unified timeline of a user's interactions with your organization. Instead of viewing a voice call, an email, and a web chat as siloed events, the journey view stitches them together into a chronological narrative. This helps you understand whether a customer contacted you through a digital channel before calling in, which is often a primary indicator of a failed self-service attempt. By mapping these touchpoints, you can better empathize with the caller's frustration if they have been forced to repeat their issue multiple times across different mediums. This holistic perspective is essential for identifying patterns that suggest your omni-channel orchestration needs refinement to better support recurring customer needs. Analyzing flow pathways is another area where data-driven diagnostics prove their worth, particularly when identifying bottlenecks in your IVR design. By examining the path an interaction takes through an architect flow, you can observe exactly where users are opting out or abandoning the interaction. If you notice a significant percentage of callers dropping off after a specific menu prompt, it is a strong signal that the menu structure is confusing or the audio prompts are poorly optimized. You should compare the timestamps of entry into a flow against the exit points to calculate the efficiency of your automated routing logic. By leveraging the flow execution logs, you can verify if specific data actions are causing latency that negatively impacts the caller experience. Addressing these bottlenecks early ensures that your interactive voice response system remains a service gateway rather than a barrier to resolution. Troubleshooting routing failures requires you to become comfortable with the interaction metadata and the specific events that trigger state changes. A common scenario involves an interaction entering a queue but failing to distribute to an available agent due to a mismatch in skills or priority settings. Within the interaction details screen, you can inspect the evaluation of wrap-up codes, transferred segments, and participant-specific data to see why the system made a particular routing decision. If agents report that they are not receiving calls despite being in an on-queue status, the interaction logs will typically show if the routing criteria were simply too restrictive. You might find that a high-priority interaction was correctly intercepted by an auto-answer rule, or conversely, that a technical jitter prevented the signal from reaching the workstation. Systematic inspection of these event logs transforms troubleshooting from a guessing game into a repeatable and evidence-based engineering process. See you in the next session. Welcome back. Today, we are exploring the foundational concepts of API interaction and OAuth configuration within the Genesys Cloud ecosystem. We will cover the Developer Center, OAuth grant types, scoping, and the crucial constraints surrounding platform usage. The Genesys Cloud Developer Center serves as the primary gateway for any professional looking to extend or automate their contact center environment. It is far more than a documentation portal, as it hosts the API Explorer, which is an invaluable utility for testing requests against your own organization's live data in a sandboxed manner. When you begin your journey with the platform APIs, familiarizing yourself with the Explorer allows you to inspect resource signatures, understand required parameters, and visualize the JSON structure of responses before you write a single line of production code. It abstracts away the complexity of manual header construction, allowing you to focus on the business logic of your integrations. As you design these integrations, you must treat the API primarily as a mechanism for lifecycle management rather than a database for heavy reporting. Always consult the interactive documentation to ensure you are targeting the appropriate versions of the endpoints, as the REST API is subject to evolution and updates over time. By leveraging the tools provided in the Developer Center, you reduce the surface area for debugging and shorten the feedback loop during the development lifecycle. Secure programmatic access necessitates a deep understanding of OAuth 2.0, which is the cornerstone of authorization within Genesys Cloud. We configure this through OAuth clients, and the choice of grant type depends entirely on the nature of your application and the context in which it operates. If you are building a server-side backend service, such as a synchronization tool that runs without user intervention, the client credentials grant is the correct choice. Conversely, if you are developing a web-based UI that needs to perform actions on behalf of a logged-in user, the authorization code grant is the industry standard for maintaining security through short-lived access tokens. The implicit grant is largely deprecated due to significant security concerns. Therefore, you should opt for the authorization code flow with proof key for code exchange whenever possible. Each client requires specific scopes, which act as the permissions gatekeeper, ensuring that your application follows the principle of least privilege. You should never grant broad administrative access to an API client if it only requires read access to interaction history or analytics data. Rate limits are an unavoidable reality of cloud-based multi-tenant architectures, and managing them effectively is a hallmark of a professional implementation. Genesys Cloud enforces these limits based on a leaky bucket algorithm, where requests are throttled if the platform consumes resources faster than your allotted capacity. When you receive a 429 too many requests response code, your application must handle this gracefully by inspecting the retry after header and implementing an exponential backoff strategy. Ignoring or failing to implement these retries can lead to degraded service performance or, in extreme cases, the suspension of your OAuth client permissions. Beyond mere rate limiting, you must also be mindful of the payload size and the frequency of data retrieval, especially when querying high-volume endpoints like interaction detail records. Proper pagination is essential here, as attempting to pull large datasets in a single request will almost certainly trigger throttle limits and result in incomplete data synchronization. Designing for resilience at the API boundary ensures that your automation remains robust regardless of transient network spikes or temporary pressure on the system resources. Security for platform access is not merely about choosing the right OAuth flow, but also about the rigorous management of client secrets and token lifecycles. Once you generate a client secret, treat it as a sensitive credential that should never be source-controlled or hard-coded within your configuration files. Use environment variables or secure key management services to inject these credentials into your integration at runtime. Furthermore, minimize the token expiration times to a level that aligns with your security policy while remaining operational for your typical batch processing window. If an application is compromised, the damage is naturally limited by the scopes assigned to its client ID, which reinforces the necessity of granular permissioning. As you move toward production, include audit logging for your API activities so you can correlate automated actions with specific OAuth clients in the event of an investigation. Following these programmatic best practices protects both your organization's data privacy and the overall stability of your Genesys cloud environment throughout its operational life. See you in the next session. Welcome back to our exploration of the Genesys cloud integration ecosystem. In this chapter, we will master the technical mechanics of data actions and webhooks to bridge the gap between your cloud contact center and external enterprise systems. In many real-world scenarios, you need to extend the capabilities of your flows by reaching out to external services. The data actions integration serves as the primary gateway for this communication. By leveraging the data action service, you can invoke external APIs to retrieve customer information or push activity updates without writing custom middleware code. This architecture centralizes your outbound requests, allowing Genesys Cloud to manage the heavy lifting of authentication and protocol negotiation. You define these interactions as structured contracts, which ensures that the data exchanged remains consistent regardless of the underlying API complexity. When configuring these actions, you are essentially creating a bridge that transforms proprietary data formats into usable architect variables. When we shift our focus to outbound webhooks, we are dealing with a push-based model rather than the request-response pattern found in typical data actions. Configuring outbound webhooks for event-driven notifications allows your infrastructure to react instantly to changes within Genesys Cloud. You specify a target endpoint, and the platform delivers a JSON-formatted payload as soon as a registered event occurs. This proves essential for scenarios like logging interactions to external CRM systems or notifying a monitoring service of a critical system state change. Because these notifications are asynchronous, you must focus on the idempotency of your target endpoints. If a network flicker occurs, Genesys Cloud may attempt delivery again, and your receiving service should be prepared to handle potential duplicate events gracefully. Building complex requests often requires moving beyond simple key-value pairs, which is where custom body templates become indispensable. You can utilize Velocity Template Language, VTL, to manipulate incoming Genesys Cloud inputs before they are sent to the target API. If you need to interface with legacy systems, you might find yourself needing to convert JSON structures into XML or specific flat file formats. Using VTL in the request transformation step allows you to map architect flow data directly into the custom schema your third-party endpoint requires. This is rarely a simple task, so I recommend testing these transformations thoroughly to avoid runtime failures. Precision in your path expressions and variable binding is what separates a brittle integration from one that survives in a production environment. Security is not an optional configuration when you're punching holes into your private infrastructure. Every external endpoint request must be hardened, typically through the use of strictly defined authentication headers. When you define your data action, you can configure static headers for API keys or dynamically generate OAuth tokens using the secret management features within Genesys Cloud. I strongly advise using secure credential stores rather than hard-coding sensitive tokens directly into your request templates. Additionally, ensure that your whitelist policy on the receiving system is restrictive enough to only accept traffic from the known Genesys Cloud Service IP ranges. By decoupling the authentication logic from the payload construction, you simplify your security audit processes significantly. Managing reliability in distributed systems involves preparing for the inevitable delays of network latency and service timeouts. Every data action configuration allows you to set specific response timeouts, which define how long the platform will wait for your external service to respond before declaring an error. If an external endpoint takes longer than expected, failing quickly is often better than holding up a voice interaction in a flow. You should also be aware of the built-in retry logic that Genesys Cloud applies to failed network requests. During periods of peak traffic, downstream microservices often become saturated, and your retry policy acts as a buffer to prevent a total service outage. Always model your error handling in the Flow Designer so that the system gracefully handles scenarios where the integration endpoint is temporarily unreachable. See you in the next lecture. Welcome to our exploration of the AppFoundry marketplace, where we will examine how to extend your Genesys Cloud platform with powerful third-party integrations. The AppFoundry is more than just a store. It is a curated ecosystem designed to accelerate your deployment by leveraging pre-built solutions. When you consider the scope of a Genesys Cloud implementation, you quickly realize that your organization will eventually need connectivity with external systems, such as CRM platforms like Salesforce or Zendesk. Instead of building bespoke middleware to facilitate these connections, Genesys provides the AppFoundry as a mechanism to download and deploy verified applications that solve these specific architectural requirements. These integrations are categorized broadly into various functional areas, including workforce management, analytics, and CRM connectivity. As a professional, you must differentiate between free integrations and premium applications, as the latter often involve specific subscription models that require formal procurement through the marketplace. By utilizing these tools, you reduce the time to value for your business users while ensuring that the data flow between your contact center and peripheral systems is both secure and supported. One of the most powerful features you will encounter is the client application integration, which allows you to embed external web-based tools directly into the Genesys Cloud user interface. This is not merely a redirection to a new tab. Rather, it is a sophisticated method of surfacing data within the existing agent workspace. When configuring these applications, you are essentially defining a URL integration point that renders a frame directly inside the desktop client. For instance, an agent handling an incoming call can have the caller's information from an external database automatically displayed in a side panel without needing to toggle between different application windows. Success here relies on properly configuring the security settings, specifically ensuring that your integration respects the cross-origin resource sharing policies that govern how web components communicate. You will need to define the appropriate scopes and permissions during the setup process to ensure the embedded tool has the necessary visibility into the user's session. A critical concept for the professional exam is the distinction between standard integrations and the lifecycle of premium applications. Premium applications are designed to follow a more rigorous deployment lifecycle, often incorporating OAuth-based authentication for a tighter, more secure integration with your organization's environment. Once an application is installed, you're responsible for managing access control, which means ensuring that only relevant agents or supervisors have permission to launch these interfaces. This is handled through the assignment of roles and permissions within Genesys Cloud, mirroring the same governance processes you use for standard administrative tasks. You must also monitor the installation lifecycle, including version updates, to ensure that existing workflows are not disrupted when a third-party developer releases a new iteration of their tool. Proper management requires you to keep an inventory of installed applications and periodically audit them to ensure they align with your current operational needs and security standards. If an organization decides to leverage these external tools, the administrator must confirm that the underlying environment is configured to support the authentication flow. Many integrations rely on OAuth 2.0 to establish a secure handshake between Genesys Cloud and the external service provider. When you install an application, the system typically creates a service client or a similar identity construct that permissions the interaction. From a troubleshooting perspective, if your agents report that an embedded application is failing to load, your first point of inquiry should be the configuration of the allowed URLs and the corresponding security policies. Remember that every third-party component you introduce into your ecosystem creates an additional surface area that must be managed in accordance with your organization's internal compliance requirements. By keeping your integration inventory lean and properly documented, you maintain both the security and the agility of the Genesys Cloud implementation. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this chapter, we will master the technical nuances of troubleshooting data actions and external service integrations within the Genesys Cloud environment. When a data action fails, your primary debugging instrument is the integrated test tool within the data action configuration page. This tool allows for the immediate execution of requests without requiring a full integration into an architect flow, which significantly reduces the feedback loop during development. When you trigger a test, Genesys Cloud generates a correlation ID, a unique identifier that acts as a breadcrumb throughout the platform's execution logs. If you find yourself needing to contact Genesys support or dig deeper into the backend behavior, this correlation ID is the most valuable piece of information you can provide, as it maps directly to the specific execution context of your failed request across the microservices involved. Always copy this ID when a test fails, as the ephemeral nature of log data makes it difficult to trace requests retrospectively without this reference. Understanding HTTP error codes is foundational for debugging, as they act as a taxonomy of failure for your integrations. A 400 bad request indicates that the payload you submitted failed to adhere to the defined JSON schema, or that required fields are missing, suggesting a mismatch in your input contract definitions. Conversely, a 401 unauthorized status is an explicit signal that your OAuth credentials have expired, lack the necessary scopes, or were never correctly configured in the integration settings. When these errors occur, the data actions execution summary provides a detail window that often supplies the specific response body from the target web service. By analyzing this response body, you can distinguish between a failure stemming from your own transformation logic and a failure originated by the external system's own validation rules or authentication middleware. To gain a more granular view of the communication between Genesys Cloud and external web services, the developer tools in your browser serve as an invaluable diagnostic utility. Although the Genesys Cloud interface provides high-level feedback, opening the browser's Network tab allows you to inspect the raw headers, payload structure, and full response bodies being exchanged during the testing process. This is particularly useful when troubleshooting intricate issues like header injection or subtle character encoding mismatches that might not be fully transparent in the data action UI. You can observe the exact sequence of the API lifecycle, verifying if the issue resides in the outbound request formulation, the connection establishment phase, or the parsing of the returning JSON structure. If you suspect an issue with data types, such as a string being passed where a Boolean is expected, the raw request view in the browser will clearly show if your architect variables are being serialized correctly before the request leaves the platform. Addressing schema mismatches requires a methodical approach to validating both input and output contracts against the real-world data returned by the API. Data actions strictly enforce the JSON schema that you configure, and if the external system changes its schema without notice, your data action will cease to function correctly due to unanticipated field types or structures. To mitigate this fragility, You should design your output contract to be as resilient as possible, perhaps by mapping only the fields strictly required for the business logic and architect. When you encounter a schema mismatch, compare the sample JSON response provided by the service against the configured output contract and the data action settings, ensuring every nested object is correctly typed and named. This strategy of isolating the contract definition from the service logic ensures that you maintain a clear contract between your Genesys cloud deployment and the external services on which your business processes rely. Until next time. Welcome back to our journey towards certification, where we will now elevate our technical proficiency by mastering advanced performance analytics and trend analysis within the Genesys cloud ecosystem. When we approach complex data extraction in Genesys Cloud, the Analytics Query Builder stands as our primary instrument for moving beyond prepackaged reports and into the realm of custom data intelligence. Unlike standard views that provide a surface-level overview of contact center activity, the Query Builder allows us to construct highly specific predicates that look deep into interaction metadata. You must understand that every interaction in Genesys Cloud is fundamentally an object identified by a unique conversation ID. Yet this ID acts as a container for multiple operational segments. A single conversation might involve multiple segments if a call is transferred between queues, placed on hold, or handled by different agents in sequence. By distinguishing between these segments, you can granularly analyze exactly how long a customer spent waiting versus how long they were actively engaged with a specific skill group. This architectural distinction is crucial when you are tasked with calculating nuanced metrics like handle time attribution, as it prevents the double counting of time across complex interaction life cycles. In a real-world scenario, failing to account for these segment transitions often leads to inflated average handle time calculations that misrepresent actual agent labor effort. Through the Query Builder, you can isolate these segments and export raw data sets that provide a transparent, objective view of the interaction path. Mastering this extraction process ensures that your reporting reflects the high level of accuracy required for professional-grade contact center auditing. Transitioning toward large-scale trend analysis requires us to shift our strategy from interactive dashboarding to the systematic use of the Analytics API for big data exports. While the user interface is excellent for monitoring real-time spikes in queue volume, it inherently lacks the horizontal scalability needed for multi-year historical analysis or massive data warehousing requirements. The Analytics API empowers developers and analysts to programmatically fetch granular metrics, allowing you to build longitudinal studies that span months or even years of historical performance data. When managing these big data exports, it is essential to observe the rate limits imposed on authenticated sessions, as high-frequency polling can inadvertently degrade your integration's performance. By architecting an extraction pipeline that utilizes paginated responses and asynchronous processing, you ensure that your reporting platforms receive comprehensive datasets without encountering timeouts or missing data points. You might use this data to perform regression analysis on service levels, identifying seasonal patterns that correlate with marketing campaigns or customer service outages. This proactive approach to data management transforms your role from a consumer of static reports into a provider of actionable business intelligence that leadership can use to forecast staffing needs months in advance. The depth of insight gained from these deep technical exports is precisely what separates elite operational management from standard queue supervision. Achieving a truly holistic view of contact center efficiency requires the strategic correlation of CX metrics with workforce management data, bridging the gap between how we serve customers and how we manage our human capital. Most organizations traditionally treat these datasets as separate silos. CX metrics define the external satisfaction and service quality, while WFM data defines internal efficiency and schedule adherence. By integrating these datasets, you unlock the ability to answer critical questions about your operational cost to serve, such as whether schedule adherence deviations result in tangible increases in customer wait times or abandon rates. Imagine correlating agent occupancy levels with their specific interaction quality scores to determine the precise point where productivity gains start to erode service quality. This level of cross-functional analysis allows you to optimize scheduling, ensuring that your most skilled agents are not just available for work, but are aligned with periods of highest customer demand. Advanced performance reporting should always aim to provide this unified perspective, as individual metrics viewed in isolation rarely tell the full story of organizational effectiveness. You must treat WFM data as the context in which your interactions occur, effectively mapping agent availability to the arrival patterns of your customer inquiries. This integrated approach ultimately allows for a more resilient contact center design that balances employee well-being with the stringent performance expectations of your stakeholders. Until our next session. Welcome to our final preparation session where we synthesize our entire knowledge base to help you succeed in your certification journey. We will consolidate our understanding of architecture, routing logic, and analytics to ensure you are fully prepared for the exam environment. Achieving the Genesys Cloud CX Professional certification requires more than just memorizing features. It demands an intuitive grasp of how the platform's architectural components interact under pressure. Throughout this course, we have dissected the administration, routing, and workforce engagement modules, but the exam often tests your ability to see the forest for the trees. When you encounter high-level architectural questions, think first about the underlying data flow. Are you dealing with a telephony-level constraint, such as an edge exhaustion issue? Or is the bottleneck occurring within the architect flow logic itself? Understanding that SIP trunks are managed at the site level while routing logic resides in the cloud helps distinguish between physical infrastructure limitations and logical configuration errors in a multivariable scenario. A consistent theme in the certification objectives is the relationship between organizational divisions and resource access control. As you review for the final assessment, verify that you can articulate clearly why an administrator might restrict a user's ability to view specific queues or recordings using division-based permissions. This is not merely an administrative convenience, but a fundamental security posture in a multi-tenant cloud architecture. If a question presents a complex scenario involving departmental separation, you should immediately look for the division-based access control setting as the most robust solution. Internalizing these constraints ensures that you can design solutions that remain compliant with organizational policies while maintaining functional integrity across distinct business units. When facing scenario-based questions that involve multivariable routing, focus your attention on the evaluation order of your ACD queues or skill requirements. The platform's default behavior for skills-based routing often utilizes a progression, such as looking for an agent with the perfect skill match before loosening requirements to secondary skills or bullseye routing. In the exam, you will likely encounter situations where an interaction remains in the queue longer than expected. Map these scenarios against the agent availability status and the current scheduling requirements defined in the Workforce Management module. By correlating the interaction's lifecycle from the initial IVR prompt through to the final wrap-up code, you will be able to pinpoint exactly where a configuration error might be hindering performance or reporting accuracy. Integration logic, specifically concerning data actions and OAuth implementation, continues to be a fertile ground for the most challenging exam questions. Remember that every call to an external web service introduces a potential point of latency or failure that the platform must handle gracefully. When designing your final response strategy, assume that the question implies a need for standard error handling within your architect flows. If a data lookup fails during an interaction, the design must account for a graceful degradation of service, perhaps by routing the customer to a general queue rather than dropping the call. Applying this mindset to your test taking will help you recognize the best path answer, which often prioritizes system reliability and consistent user experience over overly complex custom scripting. Staying current with Genesys Cloud CX requires acknowledging that the platform operates on a continuous release cycle, meaning features and interfaces evolve rapidly. While the certification exam focuses on stable, core architectural principles, you should remain aware that new functionality in the AppFoundry or updated analytics views occurs frequently. Your ability to pass relies on mastering the evergreen concepts, such as the fundamentals of WebRTC, the mechanics of SIP signaling, and the hierarchical nature of performance views. Even as individual menus move or minor labels change, the underlying logic of how a call traverses an edge device or how an email interaction moves through a specific workgroup remains constant. Rely on these durable technical truths rather than the specific placement of a button on the UI. Finally, consider the certification maintenance strategy after you have successfully passed the exam. The industry standard recognizes that cloud skills expire quickly. and Genesys maintains a rigorous renewal cadence to ensure that professional credentials mirror the current platform state. You should proactively monitor the official release notes and the Genesys Cloud Resource Center to track updates that might impact the domains you have mastered, viewing the certification not as a static achievement, but as an ongoing commitment to the platform's lifecycle, serves as your best defense against professional obsolescence. Trust in the foundational knowledge you have built here, and apply that same systematic, critical thinking to your professional practice. I hope this synthesis provides the clarity you need to approach your final exam with absolute confidence. Good luck on your upcoming examination, and I will see you in the next lecture.